Hey guys, this is Animecaps and this recap of Failure Frame Season 1. Everyone thought he was a weak orphan in a new world with E-rank skills, but he takes revenge on everyone by destroying them. Mimo was a troubled kid who got abused in his own house by his mother's new boyfriend after his father's death. The poor kid got beaten up every day while getting barely anything to eat. As he cowered in the corner, covering himself, his horrible mother watched television, ignoring his shouts of pain. He ended up growing up to be a lonely kid who was weak and didn't have any confidence. He wakes up from a nightmare of getting beaten up by his stepfather when he hears the bully of his class, named Sho, messing with a nice girl named Ya. He takes away her book and waves it around in the air, making fun of her for reading girly novels because this negative imbecile can't understand that a girl will read girly novels. Mimo imagines how, in a TV show, he would stop the bullying and win everyone's admiration, but he knows that in reality, no one on the bus cares. If he stands up for her, his weak frame will only get him beaten up. Most popular students support Sho, while the others laugh along to avoid being targeted. The teacher is useless, asleep, as Sho relentlessly demands the girl's phone number. Before he realizes it, Mimo stands up, looking Sho in the eye, and tells him to leave Ya alone. Sho laughs, calling him a sissy and weak, when suddenly Kiri, the most popular guy in class, tells Sho to give the book back. Sho obeys and returns the book to the girl, then moves on to bully another nerd, Yasu. Mimo questions why he stood up for Ya, an unusual act for him, but before he can dwell on it, everyone on the bus is transported to a different world. They are all utterly bewildered as they stand in a completely unknown place while a hot goddess stands atop a bridge and introduces herself as the goddess Vizai. She explains that every time the threat of a demon king appears, the kingdom of Alan summons brave warriors from a different world to defend their kingdom. 200 years ago, the demon king almost demolished their entire kingdom, but thanks to some heroes, the demon king was soundly defeated, and the entire demon army was destroyed. Unfortunately, the Demon King has been resurrected, which is why they have all been teleported to this world to fight as the new heroes who will put an end to the Demon King. The students are utterly confused as they wonder whether they are dead or if it is some kind of prank. Their teacher tells them to stay quiet and instructs them to hear what the goddess has to say. Mimo looks at the old architecture, the soldiers wearing armor and holding spears, and the goddess with the golden eyes before pinching himself to check if he is dreaming. Kiri ends up speaking and asks the goddess what will happen if they don't cooperate with her, to which the goddess smiles and claims that she won't be able to send them back to their world. Kiri asks whether there really is a way to go back, and Vizai replies that there is a reverse summoning ritual which can send them back, but to get that, they will have to kill the Demon King, as they will require a special part called the Evil Element, which will only drop if he dies. Sho screams at her for calling them to a new world without giving them a choice and refuses to help, but Vizai goes down on one knee and begs them to help save her kingdom from destruction. Ya speaks up and tells the goddess that they are just humans who can't really do anything, but Vizai promises that they have abilities that they had no idea about. Sho still thinks that all of this is a joke, so Vizai decides to prove it and calls forth a prisoner of war and a giant demon dog. She lets the giant demon dog loose, and it immediately lunges at the prisoner before killing him. Some of the girls are horrified at this and fall to their knees while Vizai looks at the demon before chanting a spell and completely blasting the monster into flames, removing it from existence. She calls the students forward and tells them that they are going to measure their latent abilities one by one. All the students walk up to a crystal ball and check their abilities as it glows in different colors. After the nerds were through, Sho walks up to the crystal, and as soon as he puts his hand over it, it starts glowing a bright red color. The goddess looks happy and claims that he has a rank skills. Finally, Kiri goes ahead, but as soon as he puts his hand over the ball, it starts glowing a bright golden before exploding. After that, Ya heads up, and even she turns out to be a rank. After some more students, another girl walks up who turns out to be a rank. The guards are completely shocked as Vizai explains that even one A-rank individual is considered extremely lucky, but to have 3 A-ranked people is unreal. Finally, Mimo walks up to the crystal, but when he puts his hand over the ball, it starts glowing a dim purple color. The goddess doesn't even give him a second thought and tells the next person to come up. Mimo tries to ask what rank he is, but she completely ignores him, so he walks away, realizing that even in this world he is going to stay a background character. After that, Yasu, the nerd, walks over to the crystal, who turns out to have a special dark ability inside of him which another dark hero possessed a while ago and became the strongest. Finally, everyone checks their stats as the goddess tells them that they also have a personal ability which varies from person to person before telling them that they have to perform a critical ritual now. She calls Mimo to the front, and he is immediately pushed by a guard. She sends him below in a dark pit and claims that Mimo is E-ranked, which is the lowest in the entire class. Historically, E-ranked people have caused a lot of trouble, so they are usually killed. But since this time they got so many amazing heroes, she will give the E-ranker a chance to save his life, and he will be sent to the Abandoned Ruins, which is a dungeon far away where criminals and monsters are sent. She tells him that if he manages to survive, they will leave him alone and he will get the right to live, otherwise he can kiss his life goodbye. Mimo tries to argue, claiming that he can get better. But the goddess replies that he falls into the category of failure frame, which means that his stats are so low that even after training his ass off, he cannot get better. He gets pissed off and tells the goddess that he never chose to come here, he was summoned against his will and now is being disposed of. But Kiri cuts him off and tells him that he is wasting everyone's time as the girls are already tired while everyone agreed with him. Mimo falls to the ground defeated when Yasu walks up to him. Mimo remembers the time when he helped Yasu after he got bullied, but Yasu rejects him and tells him that an E-ranker should talk with more respect to their superiors. Mimo loses all hope as the goddess commences the ritual and throws a leather bag as his special item, which is completely useless. Ya tries to defend Mimo by saying that this is wrong. Frustrated beyond belief, he raises his arm and uses the paralyze spell at the goddess, who easily manages to block it before calling Mimo a loser for even trying to hit her with his E-ranked skills.
廃棄勇者。では、儀式を始めましょう。交換時勇者にはユニークアイテムが、真剣な革袋があなたの言うだけです。待ってください。宝石にマスを流し込め。レ君はクラスメイトなんですよ。何無礼なこと。マスが彼を解放して。仕方ありません。さあ皆様、私たちの世界で言えば負け。あなたたちは勝ち組の側です。くそったれ。
Kiri also tries his spell, which creates a huge fireball, as he claims that he was just checking by letting a small amount of mana in the spell. Everyone laughs at the power difference between a loser like Mimo and themselves, while Mimo simply puts his head down as tears fall down his cheeks. He remembers how his younger self used to cry when suddenly his soul tells him to stop acting like a good person and show them the true nature of his heart, the nature that he has been trying to repress for so long. Mimo finally lets it all go as he looks up with hate-filled eyes and tells the goddess that she is a rotten hoe and warns her to be ready for him if he ever comes back alive. He immediately gets transported into a dark cave where he tries to open his status but fails because of the low light. He pours some mana into the leather bag and the gem starts glowing, which he uses as a lantern as he moves through the cave. Suddenly he realizes that he has been walking on skeletons, which scares him. He wonders what could have killed all these people when a monster tries to attack him, which he barely dodges and starts running away. The monster starts chasing him while Mimo runs with all his might, thinking whether he should turn around and fight, but his heart knows that the level difference is so great that he will simply die the moment he stops. He starts crying out of fear and gets knocked to the ground because of a rock jutting out of the floor. He turns around to see his death in its face while frustration over his life takes command of his body. Just as the monster was about to kill him, Mimo ends up trying a last-ditch effort to save his life and shoots the paralyzed spell, which, to his surprise, actually petrifies the monster in place. He immediately gets up and starts running away, but soon he reaches the end of the cave, where another bird demon walks up to him with the raw intent of killing him. Mimo immediately raises his arm once again and uses the paralyze spell, which again freezes the enemy. He realizes that it wasn't a fluke and his spell actually works, but he starts feeling tired, so he opens his stats and notices that his mana was almost completely gone. He realizes that he has another skill left, so he tries to cast a poison spell on the monster, which works very well as the demon starts turning black and bleeding from its body. Mimo sits down on the cave floor, wondering why his spells are being so effective against these demons, when suddenly he hears something behind him. He turns around to see that the Minotaur demon has managed to break off the spell and is ready to land the killing blow on Mimo. But this time, instead of running away, all the hatred for everyone who treated him badly comes back to him. Even after being completely depleted, he raises his arms towards the demon, determined that from now on he will kill to live his life, and challenges the demon to fight him, not knowing whether he will survive this time or not. He attempts to use Paralyze on the Minotaur again, but this time the skill fails to activate, so Momori has to jump out of the way. He is informed by the system that he is not allowed to cast the same effect multiple times on a single target. So he comes up with a new plan and casts Sleep on the Minotaur, causing it to fall to the ground unconscious. Once the monster is out cold, Momori applies poison to it as well. It looks like there are no restrictions on stacking effects, but he is out of mana. If he keeps using his skills, he will eventually burn through his stamina as well, and there are still a lot more monsters for him to deal with. Momori begins spamming paralysis, and eventually he has managed to stop all the monsters but has left himself on the verge of collapse. However, his troubles aren't over yet, as even more monsters begin to approach. So he has no choice but to keep using Paralyze until his body can't take it anymore. It's not long before he reaches his limit and can't go on. There are still a lot of monsters around him, but he knows if he tries to use his skill even one more time, it could mean the end for him. He has no other options available, but luckily, just as he's about to use up the last of his body's stamina, the cockatrice that he poisoned a while ago suddenly dies. Due to this, Min's level shoots up until he's at level 258, and both his mana and stamina are replenished. Mamori doesn't understand what happened at first, but then he notices the dead monster and realizes that he must have gained experience because his poison killed it. With his energy replenished, he can keep fighting as much as necessary. As he continues to spam paralysis, his skill levels up, leading him to believe he can upgrade it by repeated use. But he will worry about that later, since for now, he has to make sure he can escape this place alive. With his paralysis now at level 2, Mamori notices that he now has the option to select multiple targets at once. So he does so, and the monsters are all immediately frozen in place. He begins inflicting poison on all the paralyzed monsters, and eventually his poison skill levels up as well. But there are still a lot more monsters here, so that means he can level up even more. Mamori takes a look at his status window, and since he leveled up, his stats are far higher than they were when he first got here, especially his mana, which is now over 8,000. Mana is his only way of surviving this hellhole. Mamori takes a break and sits down while he waits for the poison to do its thing. Eventually, the monsters begin dying one by one, raising Mamori's level even further. By the time he is level 500, Mamori is fairly confident that he can now make it out of the ruins. So, he prepares to take care of the remaining monsters. However, after seeing Mamori kill dozens of them with ease, the monsters have enough common sense to know that they shouldn't mess with him, so they all run off. Now that the area is safe, Mamori sifts through the piles of rotting bones in order to find any loot that he could use. After getting his hands on a cloak and a blade, he sets off to escape the ruins. As he looks for the exit, he comes across many different monsters, but he has realized that he faces another problem: he has no food. So, he's going to starve soon if he doesn't get something to eat. So after retracing his steps, he returns to the monster corpses and reluctantly begins carving into them to eat what he can. However, as the eyeball pops out and Mamori tries to eat it, he realizes that the monster's entire body has acid in it, so he won't be able to eat it after all. With no source of food, Mamori believes he will starve to death before he ever makes it out of here. He has no energy left in his body, but then he notices the color of his magic bag changing. Since that's the only source of light he has, he frantically rushes over to supply it with more mana. However, as he does so, he feels something appear inside the bag. To his delight, he finds a bag of beef jerky and a bottle of soda. He excitedly begins eating. While this means his hunger problem is solved for now, he doesn't know for sure if he will be able to get the bag to produce food again. As days continue to pass inside the ruins, Mamori has gotten used to committing mass monster genocide with his skills. But he is worried that he might be losing his humanity because of this. After suffering abuse at the hands of his stepfather, Mamori was on the verge of having his murderous villain arc right then and there. But before he could lose his sense of humanity, he was rescued by his aunt and uncle, who took him in and gave him a sense of normalcy. He learned empathy from them, and he thought he had become a normal person like them. But right now, as he is staring at the mountain of corpses beneath his feet, he feels nothing at all. There's no going back to how he was before, so Mamori just accepts that he's a psychopath now and moves on. As he goes, he comes across another section of the ruins with a floating eyeball monster, but Mamori just takes it out with his poison. As he moves forward, he comes across a door with a magic lock, and upon opening it, he finds a small room with 2 skeletons inside. He assumes they must have been people that were disposed of by Vicious as well, but weren't fortunate enough to make it out alive. He searches through their things and finds a pouch full of gems, so while he feels bad about stealing from the dead, the gems could be valuable, and he could use them once he gets out of here, so he no longer feels bad about it. He goes through the other rooms nearby as well, and eventually he comes across one that takes a large amount of mana to open, but once he finally unlocks it, he finds a skeleton sitting with a note next to it. The note says that the skeleton was once a man known as Angan, the Great Sage, and he was the former hero of darkness. The same one Vicious had mentioned was the strongest of them all. According to Angan's note, Vicious sent him here by force after she no longer had a need for him as a hero. And while he was powerful enough to make it this far, he clearly couldn't escape. So he left a message to help the next person who could manage to make it this far. Vicious may have said the Demon Lord was evil, but she is just as bad in Mamori's eye, although he can't say he is much better than her either, since his only goal is to get revenge on her, and he doesn't care if he has to destroy the world to do it. As he is looting Angan's corpse, he comes across a book of forbidden arts. It is full of information about recipes for medicine and magic tool instructions that could prove to be useful later, so he decides to keep it. He also finds a scroll of forbidden magic, but he doesn't understand what it says. However, if a great sage like Angen went through all the trouble of keeping it hidden with him up until his final moments, then it must be really powerful. It may even be strong enough for Momori to eventually defeat the goddess if he's ever able to decipher it. Momori continues making his way through the ruins until he comes across a door that he thinks will lead to the surface. However, if this is truly the final door, then that must mean the Soul Eater Angen was talking about is here as well. Momori remains cautious of his surroundings and takes a look at his stats to make sure he is prepared for this. He did all he could to ensure he leveled up as much as possible before he got here, so he can only hope that his skills are enough to defeat it. Momori eventually finds a creepy face, and he is certain that this must be the Soul Eater, so he immediately attempts to use Paralyze on it. But the moment he steps out of cover, the Soul Eater fires a laser at him. This is the first time anything has managed to stop him from using his skill, and Momori has to think fast. Since the only way out is to use the gem on his forehead to activate his skill, he needs to say it out loud and be within a certain distance. But none of that matters if the Soul Eater can attack him before he finishes casting the spell. While Momori is still thinking about what to do, the Soul Eater breaks out of the wall to go after him. So, he really has no choice but to fight now.
おそらく俺が攻撃の意思を持った。どうする？脱出にはあの状態異常付与の発動にはスキル目だが殺すための難度は高い。それもある程度の声量が必要。どうすればいい？もうスキルは発動できない。って来やがったのか。生存率をゼロたらしめているぞ。だからこれはきっと最後の生存競争になる。
Meanwhile, outside the ruins, a girl is trying to escape from her pursuers and decides to hide nearby, not knowing the fierce battle is taking place inside. As the Soul Eater slowly approaches Momori, he wonders why it hasn't fired its lasers at him yet. But he soon finds out why, as the Soul Eater spits up some purple gunk, which takes the form of humans. These are the souls of the people the Soul Eater has killed, and they are being forced to attack Momori, so he is forced to paralyze them. However, he can't bring himself to use poison, because they are still human, even if they've become gross globs of paste. The Soul Eater enjoys watching as Momori struggles because he can't attack the souls for moral reasons, and he can't attack the Soul Eater either, because it would react too fast. Momori begins breaking down and crying a lot because he says he doesn't want to hurt other people, and he's losing aura by the minute with his constant crime. But as the Soul Eater is reveling in Momori's tears, he reveals that it was all an act. As he paralyzes the Soul Eater, he knew he could never land a successful paralyze on the Soul Eater unless he managed to get it to lower its guard. So now that the Soul Eater is paralyzed, Momori doesn't really care what happens to the souls. If he kills the Soul Eater, and even though he spent so much time trying to become a harmless, law-abiding citizen, all he cares about are the facts. Those soul puppets were trying to kill him, so they could be babies for all he cares. He's still going to poison them anyway. The Soul Eater struggles to move out of frustration that it lost to Momori, and this lets Momori know that powerful monsters can try to overcome his paralysis, but it does additional damage to their bodies. That's interesting and all, but he doesn't want to waste any more time here. So, he casts poison on the Soul Eater and destroys it once and for all. Upon doing so, the souls that the Soul Eater consumed are released, and they all appear in front of Momori to thank him for freeing them. They've been rooting for him as he tried to survive the ruins, and none of them really mind the fact that he looted their bodies either. Momori is then approached by Angen, and he has only one thing to say: he wants Momori to take down the goddess and avenge them all. The souls of the dead pass on after that, and while Momori normally wouldn't accept the request without some sort of compensation, he was already planning on taking her down anyway. Now that the final monster has been defeated, Momori can open the door and begin his quest for revenge on the surface. In the forests outside the royal capital, the rest of T's crew is out there hunting demons to level up. Shugo is chasing after a demon dog with a sword. Kiri is burning down monsters with his 6 skills, and he hits level 18 like a boss. Over in another spot, that nerd Yasu, who has a messed up personality, was burning monsters with his dark flames and laughing at their cries. But far away from them, there's this shy and innocent girl named Koba who can't bring herself to kill monsters. But this bully Asagi is telling her that if she doesn't kill them, she's going to lose her life because it's the first test from the goddess. Asagi keeps Koba on a tight leash and says the class is going to fall apart soon with all these selfish peeps formatting factions. Asagi, being a B rank, plans on creating her own crew with the girls who are going to follow her lead. She knows Koba is only a lowly D rank, so she ain't going to be accepted by Kiri's crew or the other powerful factions. Even Ayaka can't take her in, because she is about to die soon. Koba starts freaking out, but Asagi tells her to quit worrying about the small stuff. She just wants Koba to be her cute little pet, and for that, she's got her faction to trap a monster, so she can finish it off easy. Asagi tells Koba she's got to kill that monster and pass Isis's test, or else she's going to end up like Momori. Koba doesn't want to kill any helpless monster, but Asagi keeps pushing her, practically forcing her hand. Eventually, Koba gives in and kills the monster, but that act of violence leaves her feeling crushed. She starts crying, thinking she couldn't help Momori like she wanted to. Ayaka finally snaps back to reality, and that gut pain reminds her how the goddess straight up knocked her out and sent Momori away. She wastes no time and goes straight to confront goddess Isis, who is fronting with her weak-ass acting skills. She tries to play it off, talking about how she was hurt too, sending Momori into danger, but it's just their kingdom's policy. Then she says that the whole ritual to get rid of the weakest crew member is going to keep going, and while Ayaka was knocked out, she already sent those weaklings who couldn't even take down a single demon away too. Ayaka is fuming with hate for the goddess at this point and tells her that her way of doing things is messed up. Isis just laughs it off, saying everyone's got their own opinions, but she ain't going to bend over backwards trying to please them. But then Ayaka comes through with a slick suggestion. As an S-rank hero, she's going to hustle hard and cover for those who can't step it up. In return, she wants Isis to back off on banishing them. Isis actually agrees to the idea and asks Ayaka to shake hands like they're burying the past and starting fresh with a new perspective. Meanwhile, far away from the drama in the dark forests near the abandoned ruins, there's this woman hauling ass trying to escape from a group of nasty bandits. It's hot on her tail, but damn, she is slipping up and leaving easy clues for the bandits to follow. The bandits are planning to let her run wild because they know they're going to eventually trap her and take her down. At the same time, Momori just stepped out of the ruins. He checks his stats and sees his mana skyrocketed to over 59,000, but right now he is more curious about the details of his skills. He finds out he can use his paralyzed skill on specific body parts, not just the whole damn body, and he can even tone down his poison skill to make it non-lethal. He's plotting to test it out as soon as he runs into some demons, but as he keeps moving, he starts hearing squeaks coming from behind the trees. So, Momori peeps a bunch of slimes bullying a smaller slime, and he feels sorry for the little dude. But damn, that little slime got more fight in it than your average bullied kid, and it starts throwing hands back at its bullies. Momori thinks it's the perfect time to test out his new skill, so he paralyzes all the slimes and then hits the bully slimes with that non-lethal poison. He then dispels the poison and paralysis from the bully slimes, making them run away. Then he turns to the small slime and gives it props for standing up against the bullies. Momori tells the slime he's going to release it from the paralyzed state and asks it not to attack him. He sets the slime free and keeps on moving, but the slime starts following him instead.
俺をスライムってやつか。ダメだろそれじゃ。パラライズ、ポイズン。でこっちが解除か。
Momori figures the slime's an outcast like him, so he decides to adopt it. He tucks the slime into his hood so it can watch his back and warn him if there's any danger. Meanwhile, Momori gets his read on with that forbidden art book by the Dark Hero. He finds a recipe for some medicine that can boost even slimes. He then chats it up with the little slime, letting it know he's on a journey for vengeance against those who wronged him. He asks the slime if it still wants to roll with him, and the slime's all about it. Momori is stoked to hear that and names the slime Piggy Maru, and the slime's feeling its new name too. Momori keeps on walking like a boss when out of nowhere. He gets surrounded by the bandits who are after that mysterious woman. These bandits are trying to tire her out, but on the way, they picked up some other presents and ended up here looking for some fun. The bandit leader tells Momori to hand over all his valuables and maybe they won't mess him up. Momori is terrified now because the bandits look scary as hell, and he ain't never fought no humans before. The bandits start arguing about whether they should hurry up and catch that girl or waste time with random nobodies, and Momori sees his chance to dip out of there. He tries to sneak away while they're beefing, but the bandit leader ain't having it and tells him to freeze. Momori throws his hands up and begs for his life, but that just makes the bandit even more eager to take him down. He comes charging at him, but little did they know Momori was just acting scared as hell. So Momori uses his paralyzing skill to freeze the bandit leader in his tracks. Then he takes his sweet time to lay into those bandits, calling them scum, because even though they are way weaker than the demons in the ruins, their evil intentions are even more intense than them. Even Piggy Maru is mad as hell at those bandits. So Momori says killing people like them won't mess with his conscience, and he's actually happy because he is getting rid of Earth's garbage. He casts a poison spell on all the bandits, and once they all drop dead, Momori senses another presence nearby.
こいつは殺す。このゴミ肉で試す。まだ生きた人間で試して。そろそろ男だとお楽しみのてめえが壊しにかかったら。あとはあの女に手を入れちまったせいでもう。で見逃してくれ。ダメだってば。俺たちお仕事の続き。そのマガス様のエレパラライズ。よっ。
Turns out it's the mystery girl, and she summons some spiritual armor using her tribe's special technique to protect herself. She can feel Momori's presence too and knows someone really powerful is close, but the vibe he's giving off is kind of uncertain. Now, the girl ain't taking any chances, so she starts swinging her sword around, cutting through a bush where Piggy Maru was hiding. Just then, Momori sneaks up behind her and freezes her in place. She stutters and asks what he wants, and he says he just wants info because he is new to the area and knows nothing about it. The girl asks about the 4 bandits, so Momori wonders if they are her crew. She denies it, and he believes her because she ain't using that same evil intent like those scumbags. He removes the paralysis just from her head so she can talk freely, but he warns her not to pull any funny business or he'll straight up end her. Mamori steps in front of the girl and keeps it real, saying he doesn't trust nobody, especially not strangers he meets for the first time. Before he can start grilling her, the girl asks what happened to the 4 bandits. Mamori tells her he killed them all, and she can't believe it because apparently the thugs had a reputation for being hella strong. She asks Mamori if he fought them alone or had help, but he shuts her down and ain't giving her no details. The girl's got faith in Mamori, thinking he ain't a bad boy, so she decides to trust him and says she'll keep honest with her answers. Mamori is feeling her cooperative attitude and starts trusting her a little more, but he ain't ready to set her free just yet. They start chatting, and Mamori finds out he ain't chilling in the alien kingdom but is stuck in some forest down south in the Eula kingdom. Dude's learning a ton of stuff, and finally he asks the girl if she can read that forbidden spell scroll. She spills that it's written in some crazy ancient script that barely anyone can decode, but she knows someone who can. She puts Mamori onto this forbidden witch, this chick who got kicked out of her homeland because her knowledge was off the charts and people thought she was too damn dangerous. The girl tells Mamori that if he wants to meet the witch, he's got to make his way to the Golden Demon Zone, this sketchy-ass area smack in the middle of the continent. Mamori shows his gratitude for all the dope info, and she thanks him right back for saving her from those bandits. Mamori says that the information makes it even, and the girl sends him good vibes, wishing him the best of luck. He thinks she's too damn honest and innocent for her own good, reminding him of his aunt. Anyways, he decides it's time to bounce and lets the girl know the paralysis spell is going to wear off in a few minutes so she can go on her way. Piggy Maru hitches a ride on Mamori's shoulder, and they talk about how it's unlikely the girl's going to come at them once she's free from the paralysis. But Mamori tells his slime buddy to keep an eye out, just in case, because you never know, and Piggy Maru is all about helping in any way it can. Mimo soon reaches a small town called Mills. The female knight on guard duty is rather nosy about his business. She thinks that he is a country bumpkin from somewhere who came here to work as a mercenary and raid some ruins. However, she gives him permission to go inside because the lord of the town has given orders to let all mercenaries inside, especially those who plan to raid the ruins. Mimo thanks her as he heads inside and thinks that the security is very lax here. They didn't even check his luggage or ask for an identification document, but that works out in his favor. He soon reaches an inn where a grumpy old man receives him. He is not friendly to Mimo initially, but just as he shows him a silver coin, the man begins acting like his personal attendant. He asks for his name, and Mimo adopts the fake name Hattie to stay at the inn. At night, he takes a walk around the town and finds that it is quite peaceful, even though there are a lot of outsiders and mercenaries here. He notes that they have all the shops one would expect from a town of this scale in an Isekai anime, and there is also an adventurer's guild. Once Mimo collects all the information he can, he heads back to the inn and eats some food. He keeps pretending that the food is delicious, even though it is not to his taste. He keeps his keen ears pointed at the drunk men sitting at the table beside him, so he can gather some information about this world. The drunk men are talking about the strongest knight orders on the continent. One of them talks about the holy knights under the Mad Emperor Falcon, who have never lost a war. Other men name other popular knight orders and believe that the magic knights of their Urza kingdom are not inferior to them in any way. However, all the men unanimously believe that the strongest knight order on the continent is the Black Dragon Knights, who burnt down the holy kingdom of Nia in record time. They begin fanboying over the strength of the Black Dragon Knights, who also have the strongest hero killer in the world among them. Mimo has heard enough, so he takes his leave and takes along some food to feed his pet slime, Piggy. While the slime is eating rice, Mimo begins formulating a plan for the future. He thinks that first, he should find the person who can read the forbidden magic spell for him. He recalls that the girl in the forest told him to meet the forbidden witch in the Golden Demon Zone. Before that, he plans to use a strengthening agent to increase Piggy's strength. Suddenly, he recalls that the drunk men were also talking about a newly found layer of ruins in their territory, which has attracted mercenaries from all over the place, and the town is thriving. Mimo thinks that he can find the Skeleton King's bones in the ruins, which are the most important part in creating the strengthening agent. So the next morning, he joins the rest of the mercenaries who plan to raid the ruins. They are greeted by Marquis Creed, who is the lord of this region. Creed tells everyone about a new layer that has been found in the Mills ruins and declares a reward of 300 gold coins for anyone who discovers the ultimate treasure of the ruins, called the Cup of the Dragon's Eye. He promises to buy all the loot from the dungeon at a high price and tells the mercenaries that they can keep the drops from monsters to themselves. The registration process starts with that. Mimo's attention goes to a douchebag noble called Flash trying to hit on a girl who has covered herself with a hood. She asks him what he wants, and Flash remarks that her voice sounds like a certain leader of the Holy KN army of the ruined kingdom of Nia. His words create a wave of gossip among other mercenaries, who wonder if the Night Princess of Nia is really here because she has a huge bounty on her head. The douchebag keeps flirting with the woman aggressively, telling her that even her jugs are the same size as the elf princess who once refused his offer to have dinner with him. The woman tells him that he has got the wrong person, so he asks her to remove her hood and prove that she is a human and not an elf. He is confident that once he takes off her hood, her pointy ears will reveal that she is an elf, and since he already recalls the face of the elf princess, he will be able to claim the bounty on her head. However, when he removes the hood, the girl has normal human-shaped ears, and Flash is taken aback.
した記憶はありませんが
ご尊顔はすっかり記憶に実を言うと僕はかつてただせっかくこの僕にもそんな風にお高く止まった豊かに実ったその節だらで剣の方はどうなんですかねどうだ天候の文句どうだあれ
After that, Mimo heads to the store to buy some equipment, but he crosses the hooded girl, who recognizes him. She approaches him and begins talking about the raid. Mimo warns her to be careful about how she deals with douchebags because the man from earlier may come to hurt her out of spite. She replies that she doesn't care and explains that she deliberately acts rude to people so that they leave her alone. Mimo then asks the girl for her help in buying some tools for the ruin exploration because he fears that he may get ripped off. He promises to pay her for her services, and the girl gladly takes the offer because she is in need of money. She shakes hands with Mimo, introducing herself as Mist, and he realizes that it is a fake name. He introduces himself as Hattie too, but explains that he also has some circumstances like her, which is why he is also using a fake name. The next day, Mimo heads into the mill's ruins and immediately finds some mercenaries running away from a demon calf that is the young version of the minotaur he fought in the previous ruins. He paralyzes and poisons the demon, and then finishes it with his short sword. Meanwhile, the mercenaries call their senior to defeat the demon calf, and they are astonished to see that it has been defeated by someone using just one stab of a short sword. Unbothered by this, Mimo makes his way inside the ruins and finds that the demons here are not even a threat to him. On his way, he suddenly overhears Flash asking two rugged mercenaries to help him kill Mist because he can't bear to let anyone who humiliates him stay alive. He plans to torture her thoroughly before killing her, and then feed her to the demons. Mimo is disgusted by the way the filth of this world thinks, so he comes out of hiding to deal with them. Flash and his underlings get ready to finish him, and Mimo tries to test them by apologizing and saying that he will keep everything he heard a secret. Flash has no intention of letting him lie, but just as he attacks, Mimo paralyzes him and his goons. He poisons them while they are paralyzed, and it feels oddly refreshing to rid the world of filth like them. Mimo starts walking away, and Flash curses him, saying that he will get his revenge. But Mimo was leaving them alive only because some powerful demons were heading their way anyway. The demons eat the paralyzed jerks, and Mimo heads deeper into the ruins without any weight on his consciousness.
俺が悪かった
なんで
殺しまうぜ邪魔くせ
もう飲み込め
パラライズそれより誰をぶっ殺すってポイズン
覚えてる
これが意外と悪くないこそここできっちり潰しておくバカかお前
Mimo then heads deeper into the ruins, leaving dead monsters in his wake. Because of this, he is cornered by an experienced adventure party called Saber-Toothed Tigers. Their leader, Lily, and vice leader, Foes, say that they couldn't even find the cause of the monster's death, so they suspect that some extremely powerful enemy is present here. That is why they are planning to return to the surface to ensure their safety, and they only stop Mimo to ask if he would like to come with them. He thanks them for their concern and keeps going ahead. He thinks that if he kills more demons and leaves them scattered, even more mercenaries will get out of the ruins, and he will have better chances of getting what he wants. Eventually, he reaches the room where the dragon's eye cup is placed. Mimo notices a dragon statue behind it and has seen enough anime to know that the thing is going to attack him if he takes the cup. So he paralyzes and poisons it in advance and then takes the cup. As the monster dies, just as he turns around, he finds Mist there, who is surprised to see that someone reached the room before her. She says that sleeping for a couple of hours cost her the grand prize, but to her surprise, Mimo has no problem handing over the cup to her. Mist is flabbergasted and asks what she should pay for it, but Mimo tells her that she can keep it because the persona he is wearing right now is extremely naive and susceptible, especially when pretty girls are involved. Mist can't take something worth 300 gold coins for free because it hurts her honor, but Mimo keeps telling her that he doesn't need the cup or money. He begins fiddling with the platform and opens a secret passage leading deeper into the dungeon. He tells the girl that what he wants is deep inside the next floor, and he used the recruitment offer just to get here. Mist suddenly offers to be his bodyguard to the next floor as a way to pay him for the cup. She is insistent that she will be helpful to him, and after thinking for a while, Mimo agrees to take her along. He lays out two conditions. Firstly, she will not poke her nose into his personal circumstances, and secondly, he cannot guarantee that they will come out of the ruins soon. Mist immediately agrees and swears to protect him, even with her life. They soon run into a creepy plant monster with golden eyes, and Mist makes quick work of it with her sword skills. Mimo applauds her and then asks her about the golden-eyed demons. She replies that the golden-eyed demons are said to have a lot of experience points and help heroes from the other world level up quickly. She also adds that otherworldly heroes can't get experience from killing humans and thus need to keep killing demons to level up. Mist explains that it is said that a special magic element released by the Demon King is what turns normal creatures and demons into golden-eyed variants, making them more powerful and ferocious. This makes Mimo think about Kiri, the golden hero, and he gets an eerie feeling that his power may somehow be connected to all this. Soon they come to a resting zone, and Mist says that she feels the presence of a monster nearby. Mimo realizes that it must be Piggy, so he brings the slime out and introduces it to Mist. They immediately become friends, and then Mimo asks her to take a nap because she badly needs it. She reluctantly agrees and lays on the bed, when suddenly Piggy starts dancing in front of her. Mist is distracted, and using that chance, Mimo puts her to sleep with his skills. To his surprise, Mist suddenly glows and returns to her normal form, which is that of an elf. Mimo always had a hunch, but now he is certain that Mist is actually Cyrus, the Princess Knight of the Holy Kingdom of Nia. Far away from them, in the forest where Mimo killed the 4 bandits pursuing Mist, the leader of the Black Dragon Knights is looking at the scene of carnage. He believes that Mist defeated the 4 powerful bandits herself and thinks that he will have fun fighting her the next time they meet. The next day, as Mist wakes up, her transformation skill automatically activates, making her look like a normal human. She panics, thinking that Mimo might have seen her, but feels relieved when she sees him sleeping on the floor. Piggy comes up to her and starts squeaking, and Mimo takes this as a cue to stop pretending to be asleep. They start their journey into the dungeon after that. Upon sensing the entire floor rumble and shake, they decide to run away. Suddenly, a giant monster breaks through the wall next to them, and Mist recognizes it as the Skeleton King. Mimo can tell that it is the boss monster of this dungeon because it is much stronger than any demon they have faced. However, Mist knows that the odd-looking bone under its chin is its weak point, and if they just break it, they will win. Mist believes that normal mercenaries stand no chance against the Skeleton King, but together they might. The Skeleton King seems to consider Mist a greater threat than Mimo, and he has no problem with that. Mist suddenly starts activating her power, telling Mimo that she needs to use it to defeat the boss monster, but also needs to keep it a secret from the world. She asks him to keep her secret as a special armor appears on her body. The Skeleton King begins charging an energy blast, and Mist tells Mimo that in case she can't beat it, he should immediately run away. However, he takes action before her by paralyzing the boss monster with his skill. Mist is confused, but as Mimo casts a poison spell on the demon, she suddenly realizes that he is the man she met in the forest. Soon, the Skeleton King dies because of the poison, and Mimo gets the bones needed to create the strengthening potion. He takes one look at Mist and realizes that her mind is full of questions, so he promises to answer her questions once they get to the surface. They start walking back when suddenly Piggy alerts Mimo about something inside the Skeleton King's body. Mimo begins searching for it and finds a small bundle inside the demon's chest cavity. As soon as he takes the bundle in his hand, it starts to glow, and a strange symbol appears on it. On opening the bundle, Mimo finds a strange egg, but Piggy seems insistent about wanting it, so he decides to carry it with him far away from them. Mimo's classmates have also entered their first dungeon. Some students run away as skeleton knights begin chasing them, while a girl sits on the floor and cries over her severed arm. Her friend tries helping her, but they get attacked by the monsters. Everyone escapes somehow, and Aya stands in front of the monsters, determined to stop them. However, before she can do anything, Shu and Kiri attack the monsters and defeat them in one go. But Kiri uses his attack without concern for his classmates, and Aya has to shield them. Kiri is proud of his strength and reveals that he is level 24 now. Back in the dungeon city, Mimo and Mist reach the surface, where Mist presents the dragon cup to the guards as everyone's attention is drawn to the ultimate treasure of the dungeon. Mimo silently takes his leave. Mist follows him and informs him that she will get her reward from the Lord tomorrow in a public ceremony. Mimo asks if she is free until then, and on getting a positive answer, he asks Mist to come to his room at night so that they can talk about some things. She understands and then grabs his hand just as he is leaving to thank him for the cup again. At night, Mimo is creating the strengthening agent when Mist shows up at his door. Mimo tells her that he wants to hire her as his escort for the rest of his journey. He says that with the reward money from the cup, she is well set, but he still wants to hire her. He is just trying to make her feel indebted to him by mentioning the cup, even though he doesn't like this tactic. Mimo then shows her a map, telling her that he wants to reach the Golden Demon Zone at the center of the continent to meet the Forbidden Witch. He claims that since there are many powerful monsters there, he needs someone skilled to fight by his side, and Mist is the only one he can trust. Mist seems uncertain about going to the dangerous area, and Mimo tells her that she can take her time to think about it. He then suddenly calls her by her real name, Cyrus, and she responds out of habit. Only after that does she realize that she got played. Mimo apologizes to her about it, but reveals that he used his skill to put her to sleep in the dungeon so he knows her secret. He claims that he needs her as a precious asset, which is why he won't sell her out. He knew that the thing that bothered her the most about traveling with him was her secret, but now it is out in the open. Mist also stops hiding her secrets and says that she can hide her real form with the help of spirits, but they need her to sleep to replenish their power, and she returns to her original self in that time. She reveals her original form to Mimo, saying that she trusts him now. In response, he also tells her his real name so that they are even. She agrees to join him as his escort, and Mimo gives her one of the blue crystals he found in the first dungeon as her payment. Mist freaks out on seeing it because the crystal is actually a rare item called Blue Dragon Stone that is not circulated in the market anymore. Just this piece is worth more than the reward she got from turning in the cup to the Lord. She refuses to take something so precious and returns it to Mimo, who thinks that she is too good-natured for her own good. He takes the stone from her and then tosses it back to her, saying that it belongs to her now and she can just throw it if she doesn't want it. She reluctantly accepts it and then tries telling Mimo about her backstory and the people who are still on the hunt for her. However, he claims that he is not interested in her past because, as her employer, the only thing he cares about is her abilities.
護衛の報酬だ。
驚いてしまって。
清流石
清流石は伝説の杯の報酬を。
か。
いけませんよ、どうか殿。こんなあっさり渡してよいものではあり。
報酬として少なすぎる。
わかりました。
The next day, as they have breakfast together, the people in the inn begin saying nasty things about them. Mimo tells Mist to ignore them and then asks what she knows about forbidden spells. She tells him that it was Goddess Vizai who banned some ancient spells and classified them as forbidden spells. Mimo thinks that if the goddess banned them, the spells might be dangerous for her. He thanks Mist for the info and she blushes because it is the first time he has thanked her openly. After that, Mist leaves to get her rewards while Mimo goes to the forest to enhance Piggy with the strengthening medicine. On Mist's end, she finds herself out of place at a party full of nobles and rich men. It is getting too late and she has not yet received her reward. Just then, the Lord calls out a famous magician who can break illusions as a show for his guests. Mist is worried that she might be caught, and seeing that she is late, Mimo also begins suspecting foul play. Back to his classmates, Aya visits Goddess Vizai to inquire about treatment for the girl who lost her hand. Vizai says that she healed the girl only because she was a B-rank hero. She then asks Aya if she is not joining Kiri's group and tries to manipulate her into thinking that it is selfish of her not to partner with another S-rank hero despite being attacked. Aya stays firm and says that she cannot work with Kiri at the moment. She swears to fulfill her duties as an S-rank hero herself, and on hearing this, Vizai says that she will let all the students who could not pass the first trial stay with her so that she can train them. Aya panics and reminds the goddess that they made a deal that those students would be left unbothered if she fought on their behalf. But the goddess says that she got an order from the king, so she has no choice. She tells Aya that if she doesn't take the losers with her, they will be disposed of, and Aya has no other choice but to accept Vizai's order. Now on Mimo's side, he thinks that either Mist has betrayed them and run away after receiving the prize money or something has happened to her. The first option seems unlikely, so he decides to meet her. On the way, he hears people talking that the girl who got the cup turned out to be the wanted elf princess. They say that she ran into the forest after her secret was discovered, but it won't save her because the Black Dragon Knights are on her trail. Just then, 3 dragons appear in the sky and head towards the forest where Mist is trying to run away. One of the Dragon Knights attacks her, and Mist first tries to use her spirit magic to bring it down with an aerial slash. She enchants her sword to defeat the second and the third Dragon Knight, but she is tired from fighting them despite them being low-ranking knights. Just then, a spear comes towards her, and she blocks it. A dragon is charging towards her, but Mist realizes that it is a decoy and the real enemy is in front of her. So she rushes ahead and clashes swords with a high-ranking knight named Gizan, who tells her that she is going to die here. Mist can't use her spirit armor to fight at full strength because of the illusion-breaking spell earlier, and Gizan keeps pushing her back as he reveals that he got orders from a certain person to kill her on sight rather than capturing her alive. However, he plans to have some fun with her before killing her. He keeps pushing Mist back, and when she loses balance and falls, he kicks away her sword before pouncing on her. Luckily, Mimo arrives just in time and paralyzes Gazan and his dragon. Mist gets out of her situation and asks him what he is doing here, while Mimo puts non-lethal poison on the knight. He puts Gazan to sleep before talking with Mist and reminds her that they can't talk about private stuff when others are present. He tells her that he came back to pick her up, but she tells him that she cannot accept his job offer now because he will also be pursued by the Dragon Knights if he is with her. She tries to return the blue dragon stone to him as well, but he gets irritated by that and throws a pouch full of dragon stones back at her. Mist is perplexed on receiving it, and Mimo tells her that he cannot find a better escort than her and neither can he be bothered with trying. He then abruptly asks her to undress, and Mist wonders if she heard that right. Mimo then moves towards Gazan and removes the sleep spell before asking him who the hell sent him to kill Mist. Gazan looks up at him, wondering when he would die, but Mimo promises him that if he reveals the truth, he will be spared, and Mimo would remove the poison spell. Gazan decides to reveal the secret, as he also wants to see how the elf princess would react to this. But before he could say anything, Mimo senses danger and pulls Mist away as a huge sword smashes into Gazan's head. Mimo immediately turns around to see 3 dragon riders being led by a young man with silver hair and glaring red eyes, who declares himself as humanity's strongest troop known as Garland. He descends with all 3 of his companions and introduces their unit as the 5 dragon riders. Gazan used to be a part of them as well, but he spoke too much, and that's why he had to die. One of them seems to be a bit more flamboyant than the others with his styled haircut, while the other wants to cosplay as a pirate and tells Garland that they should use her as a ball and toss her around on the field before killing her since the king himself ordered her to be killed on sight. The flamboyant one tells the pirate to shut up, as the king wants the corpse to look as beautiful as Mist looks in real life. While Mist is horrified at what these men are saying, she takes out her sword, claiming that she won't die so easily. But the guys don't take her seriously, and Garland tells her that he would give her a chance to win a duel against him if she wins, he will leave her alone. However, his eyes immediately turn towards Mimo, as he is more interested in this strange foreign man than the elf princess himself. Mimo realizes that his life is hanging by a thread right now, as he can feel the power that this man has, which is 100 times greater than the Soul Eater who gave him a run for his money. He still smirks for some reason and asks Garland whether they can have a chat. Garland asks his name, but Mimo gives out his fake name, which Garland immediately recognizes and gets even more interested. The pirate seems dumber than a rock and asks why Garland is so interested in the boy, but Garland replies that this boy is not trembling in front of the dragon riders and even wishes to have a conversation with humanity's strongest man. Mimo realizes that he needs to play his cards right if he wants to survive this ordeal and asks Garland whether he simply wants to fight the strongest enemies he could find on Earth to satiate his battle hunger. Garland acknowledges the truth but claims that not many enemies can give him a good fight. Mimo then asks why he doesn't fight against the goddess Vi. Garland claims that the goddess is indeed strong, but their kingdoms have a peace treaty. However, if it ever came to war, he would love to fight the heroes she summoned from another world, as they are supposed to be incredibly strong.
先ほどまでは思っていたのだが、なぜか今はセラスアシュレイ
喉元へ刃を突きつけられている人類最強死人ガートランド。
貴様、何を笑っている？
なあ、死人ガートランド
は貴様の名前を聞こうか。
ハティ・スコルだ。まあな。
一体あの少年の何が？
ご粒子を前にしてもあれは怯え、何か仕掛けようとしている。下手に動けば私に瞬殺。幕引きにはまだ早い。
焦るな。選択肢を間違え。
Mimo smiles while Garland gets bored of Mist and tells her that he doesn't want to fight a weakling like her and asks her to simply drop the sword and accept her death. Mist refuses, obviously, which annoys the white-haired knight. But Mimo decides to sweeten the deal and tells Garland that if he wants to fight a strong foe who can actually go toe-to-toe with him, then Garland should choose him as his new opponent, as he is a hero from another world. Everyone is shocked to hear this, including Mist, who had no idea about it. Garland laughs, claiming that he knew something was different about him. He asks why the hell a hero is roaming around in the forest so far away from his kingdom, and Mimo decides to spill the truth, as he knows Garland will know if he lies. He reveals to Garland that the goddess considered him to be of a different class from the other heroes, and that's why she separated him and sent him away. There was not a speck of lie in there, but as expected, Garland thought that Mimo must have been a very strong hero and that's why he was allowed to go alone. Garland asks what Mimo wants from him, and Mimo replies that he wants to postpone their match for now. Garland laughs and asks what he will get in return. Mimo replies that he will train and become stronger than anyone, even the goddess herself, and then he would come back to meet Garland in an all-out death match. Garland laughs like a sociopath at this and claims that he would love to see that one day. He tells Mimo that he is free to go on his way, and even the dragon riders will leave once they deal with the elf princess. Mimo's face changes, and he tells Garland that he can't let them do anything to Mist, as he needs her to help him get stronger. Garland laughs once again, claiming that he will allow that as well, as he really wants to fight him soon. Karen tries to speak against this, but Garland tells him to shut up if he wants to stay alive, and soon they all take flight. Garland tells Mimo to get strong before his patience runs out. Mimo smiles and bids him farewell as he waits for them to come within the exact range he wanted them to be in and immediately uses his paralyze spell on them. Garland realizes that something is wrong, but it's too late. Soon enough, all the dragons and their riders fall to the ground one after another while Mimo laughs at them, claiming that this is not some heroic tale where people honor their words.
悪いなセラス。
外で道草を食っているグリムリット。大像をはるかに超えた良き部。再び相まみえるその時を。
俺たちをどうにか死人に見逃させること。つまり射程圏内。
どうか。パラライズ。
さすがだよ。人類最強。てめえらとの因縁をそこまで長さ綺麗な物語じゃないんだ。これは復讐の物語だ。手に排除。字幕はな。
This is his gritty story of revenge against the world, and he doesn't care how he achieves it. Garland struggles on the ground, angrily asking what the hell Mimo did. Mimo doesn't even care to reply and uses poison on all of them, killing them immediately. But Garland still keeps struggling even after being hit by the poison spell, which reminds Mimo of the Soul Eater, the only other monster that managed to move a little while being poisoned. Garland is much stronger though, as he picks up his lance to throw it at Mimo but ends up falling down out of exhaustion. Suddenly, an alarm is sent for backup and a huge horde of dragon riders arrives. Garland tries to bark orders at them, telling them to keep their distance and kill both Mimo and Mist, but the dragon riders are too shocked to see the strongest four, including their leader Garland on the ground, dead or dying. Mimo tells Mist that she can run away while there's a chance, but she tells him that she is his bodyguard and will stay by his side. Mimo smiles and immediately connects with Piggy, thanks to his newly learned ability. Soon, Piggy emerges from Mimo's back and sends a bunch of tentacles towards the flying dragon riders, increasing Mimo's range as he uses his paralyze spell on them. Soon, it starts raining dragons and humans as they fall all around him, but he decides that he is going to use these men as lab rats, so he uses different spells on them to try them out. He uses the Berserk spell on Karen, who immediately gets mad and starts calling the manager before using the darkness spell on the pirate, making him actually blind as he struggles to see what's going on. After he is done with everything, he simply leaves them to die and paralyzes them once again for good measure. Suddenly, he realizes that everyone is dead, but Garland is still somehow surviving, which truly shocks him. He walks up to him as he takes his final breath and collapses on the floor, finally dead. After that, Mimo and Mist walk into the forest, knowing that at least no one will be following them. But Mist claims that there might still be the Black Dragon Rider known as the Hero Killer who must be after her. Mimo suddenly remembers that he killed someone like that, which truly shocks Mist as she wonders how strong this man is. She pledges her loyalty to him and promises to stay by his side through any kind of trouble, while he promises to pay her back in kind. They finally start their journey together through the forests, not knowing what adventures lie ahead for them. Several days pass by when Mimo and Mist reach a new town. The town looks to be filled with life, as the market erupts with talk, laughter, and kids playing around. At night, Mimo looks around at different shops and becomes interested in a weird mask on display. The shopkeeper tells him that the mask is a replica of the Fly King, a demon king who, long ago, defended the land of the demons against a giant army and managed to save his race from extinction. However, despite his heroic actions, some politicians banished him outside the country, claiming that he was the root of all evil. The Fly King was never seen again. Mimo ends up buying the mask and takes it back to his tent, where he tries it on, thinking about how his story is similar to the Fly King's, but unlike the Demon King, he will definitely take his revenge against the goddess. The next morning, Mimo and Mist set out to explore the city. Mist believes that their enemies would not expect them to be in the middle of the city, but Mimo is still very careful, checking to make sure they are not being followed. He suddenly notices a giant old building, and Mist informs him that this building is known as the Colosseum. There, slaves and mercenaries fight against each other and animals in hopes of attaining glory, gold, or freedom. Mimo realizes that this is basically the same as the Roman Colosseum in his world and asks who controls this region. Mist claims that the Kingdom of USA manages the entire region and tells Mimo that nowadays the Colosseum has been turned into a freak fest. During the early days, many nobles and soldiers fought against each other to show their strength, and several times the best would be chosen to act as the commander of the entire army. Mimo is not interested in all this and tells Mist to follow him into a fancy little inn. She complains about how they should save money and advises him to book only a single room instead of two. Mimo turns around to check whether she is joking, but the girl is serious and claims that she doesn't have any problem with them sleeping together. Later that evening, they head down to the tavern to grab something to eat. Mimo notices that the place looks unusually crowded. He silently listens to the conversations when some men start gossiping about how the Black Dragon Knights are all dead after they went to find the Elven Princess and make fun of her by saying she must be hidden in a kitchen making a sandwich. Mimo agrees with these misogynistic jokes and keeps listening when someone claims that the group of mages who call themselves Ashinto claim to have killed all the dragon knights, while the other men believe that they might have killed Mist as well, not knowing that she is sitting right in front of them. Mist tells Mimo that Ashinto has been the talk of the town lately, as they are some dark mages who seem to worship an evil cursed god. Just as she was telling him about them, the door opens and a bunch of hooded figures, claiming to be the sorcerers of Ashinto, enter the tavern. They walk through the crowd, shooing away some people from a table before sitting down and asking for booze. Mimo realizes that these idiots don't seem to be very scary or dangerous, but because the Dragon Knights ended up dying mysteriously in the eyes of the kingdom, they can claim that their curses worked. Suddenly, Mimo overhears two men talking about the fact that the death of these Dragon Knights could be the work of the Forbidden Witch, and one of them claims that someone has seen her nearby. Mimo immediately walks up to them and orders a bunch of beer and food, asking for information in return. The men are more than happy to oblige and tell him that the Forbidden Witch is supposed to be a dark elf who hasn't been seen for the past 10 years. Recently, someone claimed to have seen her fighting in the pits of the Colosseum as a blood fighter. He asks where he can find this beast woman, and the guys tell him that he would have to get through the Colosseum, which would require the permission of the Duke. Suddenly, the door opens and a cheetah woman enters the tavern. The guys immediately smile, claiming that Mimo is in luck, as this is the beast woman they were talking about. Mimo moves towards the beast girl and offers her a drink and some food.
おい姉ちゃん、同じ酒を近畿の魔女に会ったこと
二人はどうすれば会えますか？
バカもと取り仕切ってるズアン講師少年、運がいいな。あれがモンロイ最強のイブスピードだ。
The cheetah introduces herself as Eve and immediately asks what he needs. Mimo cuts to the chase and asks whether she has seen the Forbidden Witch. Eve ends up disappointing him as she claims that it is just a rumor started by someone. It is true that she once entered the Golden Forest, where the witch supposedly lives, but she never actually met her. She asks why he wants to know about the witch, and Mimo lies, saying he is a scholar who wants to produce a biopic about her. Eve simply warns him not to go near the forest, as he won't survive a single day inside. With that, Eve leaves the tavern, and soon Mimo and Mist also depart. Mist confidently tells him that the beast was lying. Mimo agrees and decides to investigate this matter further the next day. They return to their inn for the night, where Mimo realizes that he forgot to feed his slime and gets scared of a lawsuit by PETA. They soon start munching down on some old cheese sandwiches that Mimo had in his magic bag, which Mist really likes. Mimo wonders how they can extract more information from Eve, and Mist replies that the only thing bloodfighters care about is money, as it can earn them freedom from their masters. But to do that, they would need a huge amount of money. Mimo decides to find out more about Eve the next morning, while Mist decides to burn off some calories to maintain her hourglass shape and gets into her armor, which leaves all her vitals exposed. She starts practicing her swordsmanship while Mimo watches in admiration, realizing that this woman can make a sandwich and cut it with her sword, which is a bonus. He gets impressed by her and asks whether she could teach him some basic moves, and she agrees. She tells him to go all out and attack, but Mimo wonders whether a weak woman can handle his strength. Mist tells him not to worry, as she was the instructor for the Holy Knights before. Mimo swings at her with full force, but she dodges out of the way and locks both his arms behind him. Mimo immediately folds, so Mist lets him go. By the time they are both covered in sweat, Mist realizes that women should wash the clothes, so she heads down to clean their clothes but starts creepily sniffing Mimo's cloak. When he comes from behind, she immediately hides what she was doing, while telling Mimo that she is used to washing clothes.
どうか殿のような指導で大丈夫でしょうか？
問題ない。続けよう。
不思議な感覚。私は何を誰にも見られていないようですね。
ちょっといいか？
どうか殿はいつからそこに？ところで私に何かご用ですか？洗うのは慣れておりますから。
A little while later, Mist heads off to sleep while Mimo sits down reading his dark magic book. However, like his dyslexic self, he can't understand anything. He realizes that Mist has been doing her best to make sure she isn't a dead weight and decides to thank her the next morning. Before he can head out to sleep, Mist ends up waking. Mimo tells her that he just couldn't sleep. Mist immediately takes out her herb bag and produces 3 herbs with different effects on a person. She claims that the first herb can make you sleepy and relaxed, while the second one can make you energized. Mimo wonders whether it actually works, but decides to try it out anyway. He takes out a couple of cups and puts some soup cubes in them before pouring in hot water. Mist then takes out a vial and starts pouring the herb into the cup, but later realizes that she messed up and ended up pouring the energizing potion instead of the relaxing potion. Mimo realizes that this could be difficult considering they are in a single room with no one watching, but he reminds himself of his goal, which is to take revenge against the goddess Visi, and that puts his mind back into focus mode, while Mist bows down as she has finally found the king of all incels. The next morning, they head back to the city to gather more intel. Mist returns with some juicy gossip, telling Mimo that Eve was brought here as a slave 3 years ago. She showed her true potential in her first fight and has stayed undefeated in the arena since. Tomorrow is going to be her last fight as a slave. Mimo looks troubled, as this would mean that she already has enough money, making bribing her out of the question. Surprisingly, Miss claims that there is more to the story. Apparently, Eve had already earned enough money to buy her freedom 2 years ago, but stayed behind to help a child slave whose freedom she wants to buy as well. Mist also tells him that most of the strongest blood fighters have died in their last matches, and she suspects that the old Duke doesn't like these fighters earning their freedom, so he rigs the fights against them and kills them in cold blood. Mimo wonders whether Eve has any idea that her last fight could take her life and all that she dreamed of, while Eve sharpens her blade to get ready for the battle. Later that evening, Mimo ends up tracking Eve down into a dark alleyway and blocks her path. She seems confused and asks what he wants, since she already told him that she has never seen the witch. Mimo immediately tells her that he knows that's a lie, but Mist tries to claim that it isn't. M decides to chime in and claims that they know she is lying. Mimo asks her to cut the crap and come clean. Eve immediately takes a defensive position and grabs her sword, but Mimo tells her to chill out as they simply want to help her. Eve keeps her hand on the sword while Mimo tells her that the Duke is planning to have her killed in the match tomorrow, which would be problematic for them since he wants to find the location of the witch. He straight up asks Eve whether they should kidnap the girl she is hiding and take her out of this slave city tonight. Eve gets pissed at this and claims that she will cut their hands off if they dare lay a finger on the girl. But Mimo tells her to rest easy, as they mean no harm. Mist chimes in, claiming that they know she has been fighting these past 2 years only for the sake of the little girl, Liz. Eve realizes that these guys really do know everything about her, so she calms down a little, claiming that she can't turn away from the fight tomorrow and must participate. Mimo asks whether they should take Liz away to safety, but Eve replies that if they don't follow the rules of this city and try to run away, bounties would be put on their heads and they will be pursued by soldiers and assassins for their entire lives. She claims that she might have run if she were alone, but since Liz would be with her, she can't take any chances. Mimo again claims that he can take her away to the safety of the Golden Zone, where the witch lives, as no one would dare enter that area. But Eve replies that even he won't be able to enter the zone itself as it's way too dangerous. Mimo, however, promises that no matter what happens, he will make sure to keep Liz as safe as possible. Eve considers this option and looks at Mist, immediately realizing that she has experience in martial arts, and asks Mimo what he is capable of. Mimo tries to downplay himself and claims that he can defeat the Skeleton King pretty easily. Eve smiles, claiming that a Skeleton King is a strong enemy but nothing compared to what he would find in the Golden Zone. Mimo replies by revealing that he is the one who defeated the Black Dragon Knights. Eve doesn't take it seriously though and simply laughs at him, claiming that a weakling like him could never face even the weakest Dragon Knight. But Mimo immediately raises his arm and before Eve can take her sword out, uses his paralyze ability on her, completely freezing her body while she struggles to get free. He tells her to calm down, as the more she tries, the more HP she will lose. He claims that with this ridiculous ability, he managed to defeat the hero of humanity all on his own.
禁忌の魔女の住処だよ。
不可能だ。
俺たちが同行すればたどり着けるかも。かけてみる気はないか。
武芸の心得があるようだが。
には魔術の心得がある。
確かに凶悪な魔物だが。
五粒子を殺したのが。
ありえぬ。
かはわからないが。パラライズ。力任せに動こうとすると。
バカ。
Mist walks up as well and removes her cloak before revealing that she is the elf princess whom the Dragon Knights were chasing. She claims that she saw the battle with her own eyes. With that, Mimo reveals Eve from the paralysis spell as she finally believes in his abilities but replies that even after all this, she wouldn't be taking their help and will go the legal route of winning her final match tomorrow and freeing Liz from slavery. She trusts in her own strength more than she can trust someone she just met. Mimo looks at her and asks whether she thinks the Duke would let her go this easily, since he has heard that the Duke is a pretty big thorn in the ass. Eve claims that despite the Duke being unethical, she still believes that he is just as human and can't be as ruthless as to turn against his own words, so she would trust in her skills to defeat the opponent tomorrow and start a new life. Mimo decides to leave and tells Eve that if she changes her mind, they will be waiting by the front gates of the city until the crack of dawn. After that, they return to the city when they suddenly spot a huge crowd gathered around the Dark Mages, who claim that the man of this house trashed their god, so they deliver judgment and slit his throat. They ignore them and proceed on their way. By the time night starts falling, they suddenly hear the voices of these dark mages harassing a poor girl for absolutely no reason. They try to get her involved with their cult, but she refuses, which gets her a slap across the face. Miss gets pissed and tries to get her sword out, but Mimo stops her and instead uses his berserk spell on one of them. That man starts going crazy, hitting and biting anyone near him, which gives the girl some time to escape. Afterward, Mimo uses the berserk spell on the others, who all start fighting, while he leaves the scene alongside Mist. A little after midnight, both Mimo and Mist set out again towards the front gate while Mist asks whether he truly believes Eve would seek their help. Mimo replies that he knows for sure that the Duke is a total bastard, and if Eve decides to go the legal route, she will get royally boned. The same thing has been confusing Eve the entire night as she struggles to sleep, thinking about tomorrow and whether the Duke would keep his word. She decides to put her mind at ease by directly asking the Duke whether their deal about freeing Liz was still on. But before she could enter the room, she overhears a soldier talking to the Duke about tomorrow's battle. He asks him whether there are any changes in the plan, but the Duke replies that there will be no changes and Eve would die tomorrow. This truly shocks her as the Duke talks about how he is going to give her a poison that would numb her senses. The soldier laughs while the Duke claims that he was forced to spend a lot of money on the shrine being built for her since she was very well loved by the audience, but he considers her a subhuman creature who shouldn't even be alive. Eve can't believe her own ears. While the soldier asks what will happen to the little girl, the Duke replies that he will raise her as a perfect wife, or otherwise simply pimp her out for a lot of money. They all start laughing while Eve clenches her teeth before returning to her cell.
確認するだけの疑念も
明日は大いに盛り上がるでしょう。
卑劣な企みなど
ところでイブスピードは例に従い決闘前にしびれせっかく小汚い所詮は獣ですね。満身の皮を剥いで素晴らしい。あれはいい案でしたね。輝ける場を用意してやった。票殺しとして売り出すわけですね。
As she finally comes to a decision, she gets a cloak and walks towards the main gate where she finds Mimo and Mist both waiting. Mimo is surprised to find her so early, but she replies that the Duke indeed is a filthy animal who can't be trusted, so she will take Mimo's offer and run away. Mimo claims that he wants some things in return, and Eve agrees, claiming that she will reveal the location of the witch and even enter the Golden Demon Zone with them. That settles the deal, and Mimo gets ready to kidnap the little girl. Meanwhile, on the other end of the city, the Dark Elf works in a tavern cleaning up the tables, while the fat owner comes out of the kitchen, screaming at her to move her hands faster. The poor girl tries her best to work quicker, but the fatty has less than one brain cell, so she starts hitting Liz for absolutely no reason until the little girl falls to the floor. The fatty laughs at her. Liz tries to hold back tears and stay strong as she remembers how strong Eve is and takes comfort in that. The fatty, for no reason, starts screaming in Liz's ears when suddenly the door slams open, flinging the fat ugly on the ground. Eve enters, furious at the fatty for treating Liz like that, and takes her sword out. The fatty immediately falls to the floor, begging for her life, claiming that she never wanted to treat the girl badly but that the Duke ordered her to discipline the girl harshly. If she didn't do that, he would have punished her. She tells Eve that she is going to leave with Liz and instructs the fatty that if she wants to live, she will tell everyone that Liz got kidnapped by someone and Eve went after them. The fatty cries and agrees to these demands before telling Liz that she never wanted to treat her badly but was forced to. Suddenly, Mimo enters the tavern wearing his mask and tells Eve to go ahead as he just wants to check on something. Once they leave, he walks up to the ugly fat orc and tells her that she might trick Eve with her acting, but he can see right through her ugly performance. He tells her that he has been through abuse and knows what it feels like, so he can't let her go this easily. The woman tries to call his bluff, claiming that she is the only one who can save them from the wrath of the Duke once he gets to know about this, but Mimo is done with her crap. He immediately uses Paralyze followed by the poison spell, which somehow manages to turn her even uglier as she starts dying slowly. Mimo takes out a knife and starts setting up the scene to make it look like a robbery before leaving the tavern and escaping through the sewer. They start making their way through the underground routes while Liz introduces herself, begging Mimo to let her accompany them as she wants to stay with Eve. Mimo looks at her, claiming that their path is going to be very dangerous, but Eve confidently replies that she will be fine as long as she can stay with Eve. So Mimo agrees. He soon takes out the slime from his back and introduces it to them before making their way out of the sewers. Soon, they enter the forests and start moving through it when Eve walks up to Mimo and claims that she trusts him completely and is ready to put her life on the line for him. Mimo asks where this sudden trust came from, and she replies that Mimo could have used other means to get information out of her and could have even tried to threaten her by kidnapping Liz on his own, but he decided to come clean with her about his motives. She then asks why exactly he wants to meet with the witch, and he replies that he has an ancient text that he believes the witch can decipher. Eve asks whether he intends to harm the witch, but Mimo refuses, claiming that as long as the witch doesn't attack them, he has no intentions to hurt her. Soon enough, they start moving on horseback where Mimo tells Mist that Eve definitely has some connection with the witch, and he has also heard that the witch is a dark elf just like Liz, which can come in handy as she can vouch for them. Suddenly, he notices a bunch of light coming from the kingdom and realizes that someone has raised an alarm already. Eve believes that someone must have seen her and claims that she will hold them back while the rest run away. But Mimo refuses, claiming that they will take their stand together. He first distracts half the forces by making them chase after some horses while they hide between the bushes for a surprise attack. He tells Eve to fall back with Liz. For this particular plan, he needs Mist in the front. With everything set up, he finally picks up his mask and puts it on, ready for the last stand against the forces of the Duke. However, it doesn't take long for Muwaji to realize it's a trap. Claiming to have figured everything out, he orders the hidden person to reveal themselves. Cirrus steps forward, wearing a strange helmet. Muwaji remarks that the mask represents the fly swordsman. a subordinate from the Legend of the Lord of the Flies. Setting that aside, despite not knowing who the person under the helmet is, he promises to spare the elf's life if she hands over the leopard and the child. Cirrus questions what will happen if she refuses the offer, to which the man warns that he will make her suffer through his curses to the point she will regret ever being born. With all his archers pointing their arrows at the princess, the self-proclaimed god assures her that not even the 5 dragons, the most powerful beings among humankind, survived the Ashen Sims. Hearing this, Cirrus asks for a promise that the sorcerer will keep Eve, Speed, and Lisbeth safe. Of course, Muad'Dib gives his word, and the elf instructs the members of the cult to follow her. At that moment, the archers lower their bows and begin following the knight, but the leader suddenly orders everyone to stop. After all, he doesn't believe the stranger's only intention is to hand over the hostages, especially after she asked for all the Cirrus to come along when only a few would have been enough. It seems the masked woman plans to lead all the members into the forest. With that, the sect leader orders his subordinates to step back and prepare for an attack. Cirrus grips the hilt of her sword and admits she thought the Ashen would kill her with one of his curses, but he has a secret for her. The Ashen soldiers are successors of the Assassin's Guild. Once a hero declared the guild wicked and wiped it out, but the group now known as the Ashen inherited the guild's line of work, becoming users of curses. At the end of that sentence, a drop of poison falls from the tip of an ashen arrow. Cirrus notices the substance, and Muad'Dib explains that it's a poison so advanced it can only be synthesized through special techniques passed down among the few surviving members of the Assassin's Guild. Faced with this, Cirrus reflects that the Ashen kill with this poison that leaves no trace, and this must be the truth behind their so-called curses. Muad'Dib continues his false narrative, claiming that the downfall of the Black Dragon's clan landed in his lap, which provided the perfect opportunity for the Ashen to fuel popular belief in their plagues. After all, the trick is that no one can prove these curses truly exist, and being able to play in that shadow is what has given the Ashen legends so much power in recent times. Cirrus wants to know the organization's ultimate goal, and the leader reveals that they aim to use Duke Zuan to seize a central role in the nation. By the way, Muad'Dib asks where the warriors' allies are, but Cirrus insists that only Eve and Lisbeth are with her. Muad'Dib, of course, doesn't believe for a second that this is true, as there's no way this outsider would dare face the defunct Assassin's Guild alone. Thus, Cirrus promises to explain the situation more clearly, then removes her mask, revealing her elf ears and claiming to be the true executor of the 5 dragons.
暗殺者ギルドの意志を継ぐ者たちです。我々がその暗殺者ギルドの仕事を肩代わりし、我々は高度な毒物を有しています。
痕跡が残らない高度な毒物を用いた暗殺。
実に素晴らしい理解力です。呪いの不存在は誰も証明できない。我々は図案公爵家を足がかりとし、どうあっても我々の勝利なのです。最後はこの国を我々が手に入れ
を説明しましょう。それは大事し生き残ったものだから。
Muad'Dib is stunned upon recognizing the features of Cirrus's Ashran, but everything starts to make sense to him. Even so, he doubts that the former captain of the Knights of Ni has the capability for such a feat. As he states this, Muad'Dib snaps his fingers, calling Bellegarde forward, the man who was Eve Speed's final opponent in the Colosseum, standing a little behind with a crossbow aimed at the princess, is his older brother Vargan. These are the 2 most skilled members of the Ashen. Ironically, these men had a younger brother named Zerash Finebird, known as the Fang, one of the 4 Sacred Watchers, who was killed while pursuing the Paladin of Ni. Finally, Muad'Dib assumes that these Ashen are eager for a potential reckoning with Cirrus, but the story doesn't end there. Aside from the enemy Cirrus can see before her, the Ashen leader assures her that other subordinates are scattered around, practicing the art of ambush that any decent assassin should master. Speaking of decency, the leader of the defunct guild couldn't help but notice the elf has a beautiful face, and perhaps he'll need some time to bestow his personal blessing on her and reshape Cirrus into a proper devotee of the god of curses. Without wasting any more time, the man orders the elf to kneel, which she obeys. Once she does, Muad'Dib guarantees her the honor of bearing his child. At that moment, Cirrus closes her eyes, awaiting Mamori to play his part. Wearing his Lord of the Flies mask, the exiled hero appears with his charge acceleration and promises to show the Ashen a curse they don't know paralysis. With all the servants immobilized, Muad'Dib demands to know where his rear guard is, and Mamori informs him that he already dealt with those 15 individuals while their leader couldn't stop talking. With that, the boy poisons the enemy leader and his subordinates. Knowing the rival would be more focused on uncovering some plot by Eve Speed, Mamori anticipated that Muad'Dib would fall for the intentionally broken branch and avoid entering the forest fearing a trap. So he used Cirrus as bait for the Ashen to believe they were in control, letting their guard down while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By this point in the story, all the enemies had already lost their lives, so Mamori asks the elf to return and update Eve on the situation. He then moves back through the forest and finds a strategic point, suggesting the Duke's troops are returning because his trap isn't over yet and Duke return is part of the plan. To continue, the boy asks Piggy Maru to reconnect with him, but the slime seems sad about something. Seeing this, Mamori apologizes for not considering the price the little creature would pay. Behind them, Eve's speed returns and offers to help. Cirrus takes charge of caring for Lisbeth. The leopard uses her senses to estimate the number of enemies, then positions herself among the ashen corpses to draw the soldiers' attention. Upon seeing the pugilist, they all rush forward without a second thought, and Mamori quickly paralyzes and poisons most of them.
頼みましたよ、イブ。
安心しろ。第一陣の人数をできるだけ正確。
把握した。
ようやく見つけたぞ、イブスピード。巨人の無様な死体を公爵様に見もらった。
パラライズ。ポイズン。
Soon after, Duke Zuan himself arrives with a subordinate, promising to place Lisbeth in a very bad place. Feeling repulsed by those words, Mamori immobilizes the noble, but reaches the maximum limit of active targets with this ability. So he casts the ability Darken on the man accompanying him. As a result, the enemy's vision suddenly vanishes, and Eve swiftly strikes him down. The knights who freed themselves from the paralysis become targets of the darkening spell, and each one is killed by Eve's speed as soon as they are hit by the curse. Realizing they had no chance, the remaining soldiers retreat, but they are pursued by the opposing group. Controlling the limit of targets, Mamori walked across the battlefield inflicting status ailments on his enemies while Eve and Cirrus covered his rear. Consumed by fury, the Duke ordered his subordinates to finish off the man in the robe, but by that time, nearly everyone had already been eliminated by Mamori and his allies or were completely lost. Amidst all of this, Eve's speed was slaughtering her opponents. When only Zuan remained, the Duke vowed that he would not let this slide. But Mamori, tired of his empty threats, immobilized the noble. With that done, Eve's speed approached, sword in hand. Much to the man's terror, the leopard confessed that she might have considered forgiving him if he had only deceived her, but by dragging Lisbeth into it, he had lost all dignity. Without a shred of mercy, she cut the Duke down. The battle over, Cirrus apologized for acting without orders in defending the leader's rear, and he then appointed the elf as vice captain of the mercenary group, giving her the authority to act on her own in such situations. Afterward, the young man glanced around and noticed that no enemy had been left alive. He then froze their bodies, shattering them to ensure no trace remained. Hours later, Jin was informed that the Ashen had vanished and that only the bodies of the Duke and his personal army were found. This meant the monarch's plan to use the Ashen as pawns had fallen apart, and the fact that he would have to explain this to the goddess Visus was sure to cause him much grief. With this in mind, he ordered that the Ashen should be found immediately. Meanwhile, the mercenary group was sheltering from the rain in a nearby cave. As she observed Cirrus's bathing, Lisbeth asked if she would one day grow up to be like the princess because the bar owner where she used to work had told her that if the young elf didn't grow, she wouldn't be seen as a proper woman in the future. Cirrus reassured her that nothing that woman said held any value and that from now on, Lisbeth should only keep the words of those she trusted. In that case, the dark elf said she would like to hold on to Cirrus' words, as she had begun to see the princess as an older sister. When the child lay down to sleep beside Eve, Cirrus suggested that Mamori rest while she stood guard. The boy replied that he probably wouldn't be able to sleep, so she offered him her lap to see if it would help. Jokingly, Mamori offered his lap as a pillow if the princess ever needed it, but she took it seriously and laid down on him. Startled, he apologized for the misunderstanding and she got up. Letting it go, Mamori admitted he was curious about touching the elf's ears, but when he did, she asked him to stop. Afterwards, she inquired if Mamori saw Eve as an aunt, given the gentle way he treated her. The boy explained he saw the leopard more like his uncle, as if the two shared the same heart. His uncle and aunt, after all, were the only reason Mamori wanted to return to his world. Lisbeth, on the other hand, was like him in a way, having suffered in terrible environments. The difference was that he had become hostile and wandered this world solely to fulfill his vengeance. If Cirrus wanted to leave him for that, so be it. Cirrus had her own hatred for the goddess of Aelin, so she intended to stay with that in mind. He promised to do whatever was within his power for Cirrus. The elf went to sleep, leaving him to guard. Speaking of Vicious, one of her most loyal followers, Nyantan Kikipat, was training Ayaka Sogo with the sword on the condition that the girl would tell no one about it, as Vicious would hardly allow such training. Nyantan agreed to help Ayaka because she reminded her of her little sister, and in this world of kill or be killed, she didn't want the girl to become a victim. At dawn, Cirrus came up with a name for the mercenary group, suggesting warriors of the Lord of the Flies Eve and Lisbeth were on board with the name followed by Pigimaru, and so Mamori accepted the idea. By late afternoon, they reached the land of monsters and saw a corrupted tree. According to Eve, it was a tree that was once sacred. She then asked Mamori for a bit of mana and opened a map revealing their location, and that of the Witch of Tavos. That night, they camped again, and Mamori's desire for vengeance burned stronger with each passing day. Although this land was filled with dangers, it was also an opportunity for him to gain experience and grow stronger. The next day, Goddess Visus congratulated all the hero groups for their satisfactory progress, but to raise the level of training, she announced she would bring in famous figures from all nations to train the heroes. With that, the goddess's expectations only grew to see how the heroes of Aelin would fare against the Demon Lord's army. Later, she informed Nyantan of her plans to lead the heroes to the land of the golden-eyed monsters. Meanwhile, Momori introduced white chocolate to his friends, winning their hearts even more. The next morning, they all get ready to venture into the depths of the deadly forest, but before heading in, they take some inspiration from the Chinese sweatshops and hand all their luggage to the Dark Elf Kid. Momori claims that this way they will have the best chances of survival, so they all take his word and head inside the forest. Once they start entering the grassland, both Momori and Eve sense something, and immediately a huge lizard demon appears as if it's from Florida. Momori realizes that it looks different than the normal lizard monsters. Suddenly, the lizard demon opens an alien mouth, showing its disgusting teeth. It immediately attacks Eve, who quickly blocks the first 2 blows before blocking the tail butt. Meanwhile, Momori uses this opportunity to close the distance and casts his paralysis spell on it. The monster stops in its tracks immediately, while he puts a poison curse on it, which is very effective. Soon, the monster dies. This makes Momori happy, as now he knows his spells are working on the monsters here. He tells Eve that he thinks this was a particularly weak monster, since the monsters he killed in the early dungeons were also stronger than this. That is a relief, knowing that the level of enemies is not very high for now. He moves towards the corpse and shanks it. Mist asks what the hell he is doing, but Momori hands her a book and tells her to check out the image of a weird-looking creature that looks similar to the thing attached to the lizard's face. He claims that this is a forbidden item, so he wants to carry it to learn more about it. Following that, they get ready to move deeper into the forest. They soon reach a river, and the only way through is by jumping on the rocks. Momori manages to somehow make his way to the other side with Eve's help, while Lisbeth gets ready to follow them. Eve wants to take the bags away from her, but Momori tells her to let Lisbeth do this on her own to build some confidence. Eve is worried that Lisbeth might fall, and her fears come true when she actually ends up slipping while jumping. Thankfully, the slime immediately catches her, saving her from a pointless death. Afterwards, Mist starts hopping from stone to stone, but this useless woman ends up slipping and falls into the stream. After getting completely wet, she starts sneezing, so Momori offers her his cloak, but this only makes her wetter. Eve tells them to get a room, but suddenly stops as her kitty senses start tingling. She tells Lisbeth to back off and call Momori in front, claiming that she sensed a very strong monster and doesn't think she can take it on by herself. Momori immediately walks ahead and tells Eve to back off and act as bait while he lays his trap. He hides behind a tree while these huge but stupid bug monsters start breaking down all the trees to reach near their prey. They end up coming into Momori's range, though he emerges from behind the tree and uses his paralysis spell on both of them. The monsters immediately stop, while Momori feels proud that he managed to stop the monsters that even the strongest gladiator couldn't. He walks up to them confidently and uses the berserk spell on both of them, causing them to bleed and die a horrible death.
ピギマルとの融合技を準備。てめえか。パラライズ。まともにやり合えばな。バーサク。バーサク。
レベルが上がりました。
ようやくレベルが。
Momori calmly walks up to the dead monsters and shanks them as well, while Eve asks whether he is planning to eat them. But Mist tells her not to overuse her tiny brain, as the monster is listed under the forbidden items in the Dark Arts book. According to her, this item is used to strengthen a slime to a huge level, and Momori tells her that she is absolutely right. They get ready to move on when they suddenly feel a mysterious presence very close to them, but for some reason they are unable to figure out where the hell it is coming from. Suddenly, the slime starts acting weird and tries to get out of the bag. Momori takes the bag off and opens it, only to find a mysterious egg inside. The egg starts glowing and hatches to reveal a weirdly blue horse that starts running around like a crazy hoe. Momori doesn't know what to make of it. Even misclaims that she doesn't know any horse demons that look like this. The horse tries to come near Momori and starts cuddling with him. Since Momori can't sense any hostility from the pony, he decides to keep it and see what happens. Suddenly, Mist discovers a weird tumor-like thing on the horse's back and wonders what it does. Momori realizes that this tumor-like thing is actually a mana crystal connected to the horse, so he starts transferring his mana into the horse without even asking for consent. The horse screams and moves, but Momori holds it still and soon realizes that the horse is getting stronger. Suddenly, it starts glowing as a purple aura emerges from it, and soon it transforms into a giant black stallion. Momori is impressed by this and wonders whether he could have it carry their luggage as well, but the horse seems to want to go for round 2. Momori tells it to calm down as he is still in the post-nut clarity stage, but soon enough he starts transferring more mana into the horse, which glows red and transforms once again into an ugly 8-legged black horse with giant horns. The ugly horse definitely looks cool, so Momori decides to keep it for style points while it slathers its tongue all over Mist. By the time night falls, they all manage to find a place to stay near an abandoned temple while the girls are back in the kitchen where they belong. Mamori is outside looking at the night sky. Soon, Mist joins him claiming that they have made quick progress thanks to the horse, and Mamori agrees when he sees some weird light coming from the other end of the forest. He wonders what the hell is happening there when he suddenly realizes that the kingdom of Aelin is that way. He realizes that the goddess must have sent the other heroes into the forest. His guess is spot on, as his classmates are also in the forest, fighting against the weird bug monsters. Even though all of them have grown stronger, Kiri has reached a point where he easily demolishes an entire horde of these monsters with a single attack, claiming that he is going to be the future king of this country.
一匹はこちらで与える余裕はないかもしれん。
僕の2匹目は僕が処理しよう。一部の魔物が方向を変えた。マスター。俺の固有スキルのレベルは桐原の力だ。
Back in the temple the next morning, Eve wakes up only to find Mamori missing. Mist realizes that even the slime is gone, but Eve claims that she doesn't think Mamori would simply abandon them in the middle of the demon zone. They soon walk outside and, surprisingly enough, find Mamori sitting in front of a giant demon corpse, shanking it left and right. Eve is shocked to see that Mamori defeated such a strong monster all alone, but Mamori replies that the demon arrived when they were sleeping, and he didn't want to disturb them. Soon, they all pack their gear, and Mamori decides to head out once again and try to cover ground before the storm comes. They all start walking again, and Mamori asks Lisbeth whether she is scared of this forest. The elf girl replies that she was scared before, but Mist told her that as long as Mamori is with them, they will definitely make it out in one piece without any trouble. Mamori realizes that these people trust him a bit too much and wonders whether he will be able to save them if a really strong monster arrives. His thoughts are broken though when they find a hole in the wall that can act as a shortcut and substantially reduce their time to find the witch's home. Eve starts talking about how she is going to find a small house and make it her own, after which she is going to spend her entire life peacefully living with Lisbeth and having fun. They all feel happy seeing that their dangerous journey is nearing its end when suddenly a huge monster appears right behind Eve. Mist and Mamori both try to save her, but they are too far away to strike. Thankfully, Eve is a strong and independent feminist who takes out her sword and slashes the monster in half. She backs off immediately, asking Mamori whether he knows anything about it. But Mamori has no idea what this thing is and immediately casts a paralysis spell just to be safe. He wonders why he is feeling a little jumpy, even though the monster is dead, when suddenly a huge light erupts from the demon as it starts screaming. Mamori touches the ground and soon realizes that this was a trap, as he can feel a huge horde of monsters approaching them from all directions. He knows that there are way too many even for him to handle, and wonders whether they will ever survive this situation. In the habitat of the giant-mouthed monster, the death scream that echoed through the air served as bait to lure a massive horde toward them. The group had some time before the enemies arrived, so they needed to think of an escape plan. Eve Speed took charge, announcing that she would be the bait to lead the monsters away, while the others should use the distraction to find the witch. Lisbeth didn't like the idea, but the leopard reassured the child, saying it was her fault this had happened, so she needed to fix it. Besides, the feline senses were incredibly sharp, and she was an expert at maneuvering in such terrain. Mamori understood why Eve wanted to serve as bait, but he imposed a condition: she had to promise to come back alive. Without hesitation, the feline promised, though Mamori didn't like the fact that she made such a promise, knowing her chances of survival were slim. First of all, he explained that Speed shouldn't feel responsible for this, as the monster she attacked had remained hidden until it was very close, appearing suddenly without warning, which would have startled anyone. Even Mist admitted she would have done the same thing in Eve's place. Mamori confessed that he should have used his status ability immediately, so he also shared some of the blame, considering that the leopard shouldn't bear all the guilt. The man reminded them that she was essential for finding the witch, as she was the only one with the map embedded in her body. Given that Eve was someone the witch trusted, this could greatly aid in negotiating. Afterward, Mamori separated his voice projection stone, which would act as an amplifier for his mask, then announced that he was the one most likely to survive. Therefore, he Pijimaru, and Slay would be responsible for luring the horde of monsters. Additionally, only his status condition ability could guarantee a lethal blow against the humanoid beasts. Lisbeth thanked him for going in the feline's place, but he responded that it was too soon for thanks. Finally, Mist melted down and wished the mercenary good luck, while Mamori left the rest in the elf's hands if he didn't return. With that, he embarked on his mission, leaving the group behind. Among the students scattered throughout the forest, the instructors did everything they could to control the situation, but the overwhelming number of monsters around was simply unavoidable. The more confident students fought against the creatures, while Kihara hated the fact that he felt utterly insignificant in this situation, just another obstacle for these beasts to crush. In other parts of the forest, some students didn't have the same skills as the stronger members and were fleeing for their lives however they could. Some even took advantage of others, as when Kobato tried to save Kenny from a monster but ended up being overpowered. Kenny, after being saved, ran away leaving her savior to die, ironically thanking her on the way out. Even so, Kobato felt relieved that no one had died yet, but as soon as she said that, she remembered the tragic fate of Mamori and immediately took back her words. Meanwhile, the discarded hero felt it was time to act. He had ordered the women in the group to hide in a cave they found along the way, and now it was time to execute his plan. He enlarged Slay with his mana and mounted on him, setting off alongside Pijimaru toward their goal. Channeling mana into his mask, he instructed the slime to signal the start of the battle. The creature projected its power into the mask, making it resonate to attract the horde. Soon enough, the sound of monsters pursuing the human could be heard, and he donned the mask preparing for a high-speed chase.
そろそろか。行くぞ！この辺でいいだろう。
As the pursuit began, Mamori wasn't sure if he would survive because, depending on the strength of these humanoid beasts, he could be doomed. But he couldn't show any doubt in front of his group, so he went in with confidence and threw himself into the fight. By his side, Pijimaru and Slay were determined to stick with their master through thick and thin in the name of protecting Mist, Eve, and Lisbeth. The human then activated his charge acceleration as the monsters swiftly closed in. Amidst all this, Ayaka saw her friends dead in that forest and tried to maintain her composure. She approached Yasu, asking if Hiruka and Sakuma, the two who died, were part of his group. Yasu responded that priority should be given to high-ranking heroes like him, and that the two were too slow to escape, so they were left behind. Distressed, Ayaka asked if he did nothing when the horde appeared, considering he was a Class A and should have protected his comrades. Hearing this, the boy snapped and told her to shut up, accusing her of acting superior and always belittling others. Ayaka defended herself, arguing that she was merely suggesting he protect the others, but Yasu didn't want to hear it, shouting that he survived because he was strong and the others died because they were weak, as if it were simple. Ayaka retorted that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, but the boy mocked her, saying she spoke as if she were one of the strong ones. According to him, Haruka and Tsukuma were the first to look down on Mamori when he was thrown into the ruin of discard, and before that they had always bullied Yasu at school. For this reason, he felt no pity for them. At that moment, Kiruhara appeared alongside Yamada, declaring that Yasu was a nobody. He explained that, while everyone has potential for greatness, only those who earn it become worthy of it otherwise, their success would only be temporary. Yasu questioned what he meant by this, to which Kiruhara replied that the boy was behaving like a nobody. Finally, he categorically stated that Yasu was vastly inferior to him and pointed his sword at the younger boy. According to Kiruhara, Yasu proved himself to be insignificant when he lost his composure in front of Ayaka. Only those of real greatness, like Kiruhara himself, should hold any authority because the weak tend to lose control. Though he pitied the boy for being deluded into thinking he was Class A, Kiruhara didn't consider Yasu worthy of such power. Yasu, now blinded by rage, lost it completely. He summoned the spirit of the sea and pointed a finger at Ayaka, using her as proof that there are heroes ranked as S-class who haven't learned a single skill, while all the others already have. And then there's Ashagi, who managed to learn a unique skill that surpasses even Yamada Mata's and a class hero, despite Ashagi being in B class. In other words, Yasu wanted to prove that rank isn't everything. Furious at this wild performance, Yamada prepared to finish him off, but Kiruhara stepped in and told her to back down. Annoyed, Yamada questioned if Kiruhara was chickening out, to which Kiruhara looked back at her with a face that said he was about to turn her into pudding. After his little show, Yasu retracted his mana Aurus, stating that the weaklings present were his true enemies, and then he left. Faced with this, Kiruhara admitted that Yasu was right about one thing: Ayaka really isn't living up to her S-class status. He advised her to understand her place before it's too late. With that, in his typical arrogant fashion, Kiruhara declared that he must demonstrate his greatness so the weaker ones will know who's in charge. With those parting words, he disappeared as well. Meanwhile, Ayaka found out from Kenny that Kashima Kobato has gone missing. At the same time, Eve Speed decided to go after Mamori since too many monsters were chasing him, and the guy was clearly not in his best shape. Ever since they arrived in this territory, he's the one who slept the least. Eve suspected that Mamori has been using his sleep-inducing skill on them all periodically so they could rest peacefully in this hostile land. Mist chimed in, saying that Mamori has been sacrificing his own sleep since they arrived in the region to keep the rest of the team hopeful. The leopardess added that thanks to Mamori's efforts, they managed to make it deep into the region but insisted that she should be fighting now. She wasn't kidding when she said she specializes in this kind of terrain. For instance, she has night vision and sharp hearing, and she's the only one who can carry both Mamori and Slay if they get hurt. With that reasoning, Mist granted the leopardess permission to join the fight. In the heat of the pursuit, Mamori used Pijimaru to drive his enemies mad from a distance, triggering a massive brawl among the monsters chasing them. Watching the chaos unfold, he noted the primal state of these creatures, preferring to kill rather than die in a desperate fight for survival. Soon, some regained their composure and resumed chasing him, so he responded by paralyzing a few along the way. Analyzing the situation, his surprise attack didn't buy him any time, and the human-faced beasts were quickly adapting to his tentacle strikes. With that in mind, he checked in with Pijimaru and Slay, who both responded eagerly, ready to continue.
Yare!
混乱をきたしたのと一緒れるように殺す。
バラライズ！
戦闘中央の触手攻撃対策。ピギマル、スレイ、まだいけるか？
Suddenly, heavy rain started to pour, muffling the sounds around him. This meant Mamori wouldn't be able to track the monsters by sound or sight, as visibility had dropped significantly. He checked his status and concluded that his combo with Pijimaru was a key strategy, but with his mana points depleting fast, they only had about 10 minutes left. In other words, if he wanted to stay in the game, Mamori needed to level up and instantly restore his MP, and the only way to do that was by killing the human-faced beasts, which grant a ton of XP. The problem was, he didn't know how strong they were, and on top of that, he needed to be relatively close to the monsters he killed to earn XP. So he decided to retrace his steps. Executing this maneuver, Mamori doubled back, driving several monsters mad and paralyzing them to gather as much experience as possible. Running ahead, he aimed for one of the human-faced beasts to level up, and as he neared the paralyzed creature, he finished it off, instantly leveling up and restoring all his MP. With that done, he extended Pijimaru's tentacles once again, charging back into the fray with full power. Sticking to the strategy he just proved successful, without wasting time, he unleashed the same tactic on another wave of monsters hiding in the forest. After defeating those monsters and continuing to flee from the rest, two enormous beasts started chasing the human, and they had already adapted to the point of using other monsters as shields to avoid the status effects Mamori had been inflicting. Needing both in his line of sight, Mamori tricked them and snuck up from behind, using paralysis and madness to finish them off, leveling up again. Back to his plan, Mamori dove into yet another horde of monsters, using his abilities at full throttle once more. However, one of the creatures hit the ground hard after being struck, and Slay tripped over it, tumbling to the ground. With that, the human found himself in the midst of this endless horde, throwing out skills left and right to hold back what seemed to be his inevitable death. Finally leveling up, Mamori's mind was now consumed with one thought: to eliminate these enemies. Meanwhile, after slaying the monster in front of her, Kabato concluded that she wasn't cut out for this, because even when Mamori suffered like that, all she could do was hide and watch. Eve Speed arrived, feeling sorry for the girl's torment. Seeing Lisbeth in the human's face, the leopardess approached to comfort her. At that moment, the one who walks with lightning unlocked stage 1 and attack speed. The feline resisted the blow, but as Itsuki unlocked stage 2, Eve was overpowered by the electricity. Unable to speak, she remembered that these were the ones summoned by the goddess to defeat the source of evil, the heroes from another world. In the middle of this realization, Itsuki struck Eve Speed. Meanwhile, Lisbeth prays for her friends who have left for their missions. Mist comforts the young girl, reminding her of what Mamori had said about him having the best chance of surviving this situation. Back to the leopard, although her movements are hindered, she manages to dodge the strike and block the following attacks. However, her opponent's intensity reaches a point where the feline can no longer evade. Just as she was about to land the blow, Itsuki is called by another companion, interrupting her mid-action. It was Hijiri, Itsuki's older sister. The younger one questions why she was stopped, and the elder explains that this leopard isn't a monster, but rather a being with intelligence and manners much closer to humans than one might imagine. In other words, it's possible to communicate with this beast. Itsuki points out that the leopard hasn't said a word so far, but her companion suggests that the heroine's electricity might have affected her throat. With that said, Itsuki apologizes for going overboard when her sister is around, watching every movement of the newly arrived human. Eve Speed considers that she seems reasonable but still keeps her guard up. Either way, these three women remind the feline of Mamori, so she sheaths her sword. Hijiri introduces herself formally and explains that she and her comrades are humans from another world. She then mentions hearing about a leopard from the Bloodsport that had gone missing, suspecting that she might be searching for someone she got separated from, assuming the athlete is on the run. Eve explains that she's looking for her master, and given that Eve believes her master is still alive, despite the monster stampede, this man must be very powerful according to Hijiri. Eve praises the woman's insight but responds that her master cannot be judged by such a simple measure. After Speed departs, Hijiri becomes even more intrigued by this Bloodsport athlete. Meanwhile, Mamori remains in the eye of the storm, casting spells frantically at the monsters surrounding him until they're all dead. Lastly, a colossal elephant-like creature arrives in a devastating manner, but the man manages to control it with his sleep and poison abilities. After resolving the situation, Momori notices that Pijimaru and Slay are exhausted after working so hard, and he himself is injured after the rough fall from his horse. Nonetheless, upon checking his status, he realizes he's reached level 2000, but his energy and wounds don't recover no matter how high his stats are, and he starts feeling weak. Beyond that, he senses there's still a living monster among them, probably one with a human-like appearance, hiding to avoid any of Momori's abilities, as the man can only cast spells when the target is in his line of sight. Next, the monster appears, shielding itself with others in front to avoid being hit. Momori mounts Slay and dashes in the opposite direction of the creature, demonstrating extreme superiority over the rest. The intelligent monster casts a spell into the air, a sphere that rains beams down, nearly hitting the horse. Slay needs to dodge with agility to avoid being thrown off, but Momori ends up being grazed on his left shoulder. Eventually, the beams become so intense and frequent that the horse can no longer evade them, resulting in one of its legs being pierced, causing it to collapse. In this critical situation, despite the slime's exhaustion, Momori asks Pijimaru for one last task. Surrounded by other creatures serving as shields, the human-faced monster repeats its last spell, raining down another series of energy beams on its targets. But as the smoke clears, it sees no one. Suddenly, the Lord of the Flies mask is thrown into the battlefield, catching the monster's attention, and then it shoots at a decoy created by Pijimaru. Finally, Slay diverts the monster's focus once again, allowing Momori to emerge from above, paralyze the enemy, and then cast the Madness spell. With victory in hand, the arrogant mercenary explains that he used his mask as bait to convince the opponent it was a trap. Then, while the monster was distracted by Pijimaru, Momori jumped into the air to gain a full view of his adversary. Although the monster tried to cover itself entirely as a precaution, it also couldn't see everything around it clearly. After the creature's death, Momori feels his shoulder ache even more, so he checks his status and realizes he's in critical condition. With the victory, he levels up to 2019, unlocking a new advanced ability. But given his severe injuries, he sets this discovery aside for now, focusing on rejoining the rest of the group as soon as possible. However, red eyes appear within the forest, putting the human on alert once again. Without giving Momori time to come up with a strategy, a giant wolf attacks him, only to be unceremoniously sliced in half by a blade. It was Eve Speed who gathered her severely injured master and continued on their journey, carrying all three alone. Eve recounts how she met heroines from another world, Hijiri, Takao Itsuki alias named Kashima Kobato. Since she didn't know the nature of Itsuki's relationship with the women, Eve chose not to mention his name. That's exactly what Itsuki wanted because he wants to continue appearing dead to his classmates, as the heroes from Class 2C could easily become an obstacle in his quest for revenge against the goddess Visis. After some time, the group finally reunites with the rest of the team safely despite the odds. Upon returning to the cave where they are staying safe, Eve Speed volunteers to stand guard while the others rest. In turn, she tends to Momori, stitching up his clothes. Though he can't sleep due to everything that happened, the young man sees just lying down as a big step forward to help the leader rest. Mist offers him her lap, and after some hesitation, Momori finally gives in, remembering the last time he did something like this when his aunt had let him rest on her lap many years ago. The elf touches his face and asks him not to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Even when a massive horde of monsters charged with all its fury, Momori managed to defeat them one by one as if they were nothing. That's why Mist is afraid he'll take on so many responsibilities that he won't be able to bear the burden. In response, Momori asks his friend to support him through whatever may come and to prevent that from happening. After this, the young man recalls the attacks he suffered in childhood and realizes he's slowly regaining the person he used to be. At that time, if he hadn't become what he did during the ruins of Discard, this cruel world would have surely destroyed him, so the transformation was necessary. But for now, at least for a moment, he can go back to being who he once was. Mist reinforces that he can call on her whenever he needs, and he responds that this must be what it feels like to have an older sister. By the way, the elf asks how old Momori is, and he replies that he's 17. The boy is surprised to hear that the princess is 19, as he assumed elves lived for centuries. Mist had also thought he was older because of how calmly he handles everything, so he wonders if she'll treat him as her younger brother from now on. But she points out that Momori is the leader of the Lord of Flies warriors and deserves treatment fitting his position. In other words, Momori is Mist's beloved and only king. Soon after, the human falls asleep and the elf realizes she has never felt this way about anyone. She leaves him alone in his bed but stumbles and almost falls on top of him. As her mouth nears his, she hesitates before lightly kissing him, but quickly scolds herself for what she did. Sometime later, Momori wakes up and calls the elf, noticing she can't sleep. So he asks if he can use his sleep ability on her, and she allows it. Afterward, the human laments having allowed himself to become so vulnerable around someone else.
あなたは今や私の
そっか。
どうか殿、眠りになってしまったのですか。疲れ果てていたのですね。自分が誰かをこんな風に思う。これが年相応の。あ、どうか殿。
Meanwhile, the trio of heroines continues their journey back to the rest of the heroes, and Itsuki questions why Kashima is in Ashagi's group, as she seems to fit much better with Ayaka, the class representative. This question makes Kashima recall the moment of her trial to join the team. Faced with a monster she was supposed to kill, she hesitated, so the leader took her sword and swiftly ended the creature's life. Even so, Ashigi passed the novice in the test and included her in the team, though it seems the reason for this was far more sinister than just wanting a warrior by her side. After hearing about the trial, Itsuki comments that Ashagi has a dangerous aura, but the girl thinks that's precisely what might save Ayaka when the time comes. The next morning, Mist tells Momori that she'll confess something to him one day because right now she doesn't have the courage and needs some time. The boy understands and continues on his way while the elf reflects that she may lose her master's trust if she confesses how she feels, but that one day she'll have to tell him, even if it destroys their relationship. Momori ponders that if Mist hasn't noticed what he already knows, then everything is fine for now. In any case, Mist intends to be her king's sword while Momori intends to maintain their relationship as lord and elf. Later on, they come across a magical seal, the type that triggers a trap under certain conditions. But since the formula is damaged, the trap shouldn't activate. With that in mind, Momori hopes the witch isn't already dead because if the forest traps are falling into disrepair like this, that could be a bad sign. Around the region, other similar seals could be seen in abundance, and one of them ends up being triggered, giving life to a stone golem that Momori immediately paralyzes. However, he chooses not to destroy the monster so as not to give the witch the impression that they are hostile toward her. Continuing their adventure, they eventually enter the witch's domain, where no monsters could be sensed nearby. In a wooden cabin by a lake, Eve finds a hidden basement beneath a rug, where small golems worked quietly and without showing any aggression toward the visitors. Inside, Momori tries to open a door by injecting mana into its magical compartment. Doing so, he notices the witch didn't even bother hiding this compartment because it requires an enormous amount of mana to activate. The door opens. Back with the heroines, the trio returns to the rest of the group, but just as Kashima was about to hug Ayaka, Ashagi steps in and hugs her, informing her that the four saints are still looking for her, but that luckily she's back. As Ashagi departs, Kashima reflects that she's still a shy and naive girl, which is why she needs to grow stronger. Hijiri tells her sister that rescuing Kashima was the right decision because she believes the soldiers they found dead in the forest wanted to execute the 2C students. If Kashima had died at their hands, Ayaka would have been emotionally devastated, which would have affected all the heroes. Upon crossing the door, the Lord of Flies warriors find an underground sky with a very real breeze, as if it were a portal to another dimension. Amidst a mountain, a woman with a scepter walked across the veranda of her residence. She was the Witch of Taboo, the only one capable of deciphering the scroll of forbidden magic, which in turn is the key for Momori to get his revenge against the goddess Vices. Speaking of Vices, she orders the four saints to bring the heroes back immediately as demonic forces are mobilizing. She can't wait to see how strong her envoys have become. Returning to the protagonists, the Witch of Taboo introduces herself as Erika, while Momori can hardly wait to exact his revenge on his #1 enemy in the future. This is the end of Failure Frame episode 12. Thank you so much for staying on this channel and watching our videos. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so we can keep you updated with our latest content. See you in the next video.